Hello everybody and welcome to another yearly tradition here on the channel where every June I rank all of the scenarios that I've played to see how I feel about them and how, what my thoughts are from one year to next year, and to see how it all comes together, and basically just like talk on and on and on and on about Arkham Horror for your entertainment. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you do, consider liking or subscribing if you haven't already subscribed. It means a lot and it helps the channel do a lot of more videos for all of you. If you want to go a step further, you can also join our Patreon, by the way, down in the video description. Alright, so how this works is we're going to talk about each scenario step by step, campaign by campaign, with a few little standalones in between. There's going to be spoilers throughout this whole thing. It's unavoidable when we're talking about scenarios. I'm going to try as best as I can to leave each spoiler section, leave spoilers for a campaign within their own section. I'm going to do my best to do that. So you can scroll down by campaign down in the video description, and also you can just see all the time codes for that. All right, for the tier list itself, for the ranking, this one's actually pretty simple. The bottom one is haven't played. This is a scenario that I've not played, so I cannot talk about. There are going to be some Hemlock Vale scenarios and maybe one Scarlet Keys scenario that we're going to be including on the list for that one there. Next up is I don't like playing it at all. So this is a scenario that I actually don't like. I actually don't enjoy playing, so I don't really want to... I don't really have any positive things to say about it. Annoying is I can play it, but it's not like my cup of tea. It bothers me more than I enjoy it. Fine is now when we're kind of sitting at the scenario is... fine. It's not bad. It's not good. It's just a fine scenario. Then we go up to good, where we're starting to get into the scenarios that are starting to cook a little bit. Then we go into great, amazing, and one of the best. So that's when we get in the top tiers, they are pretty straightforward. I also got to say, there was a comment on this series last year or the year before where someone said, this guy ranks so many scenarios in the fine or annoying section and he still plays the game. I'm like, okay, first off, have you engaged with art and culture? The reality is that most things in life are kind of just fine, right? So it's the reality of things. When you are critical, most things are going to end up being, your standards are a little bit higher. So yes, things are going to be fine, but a fine scenario is not a bad scenario. Fine is there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 good, 5 that are positive, and then there's only 2 that are negative. So yeah, it's going to be how it goes. All that said, we're going to talk about the Gathering first. We're going to dive into the core set for these 3 scenarios. The Gathering here is our first one. This is the tutorial scenario. And honestly, it's still, I think, just a fine scenario. It does the job really well. I played it most recently, actually, with Julie's best friend. Her husband wanted to play Arkham. So I built him a Tommy deck, and I played a Trish deck. And we played through the first 2 scenarios of the Night of the Zealot. And they actually were... It's a good... it's just it gets the job done. I'm going to say good a lot to describe fine, because it is, you could call good really fine and it would still be applicable. But the Gathering, it's very on the rails. But that's okay, right? For a tutorial scenario, that's just exactly what you want to get. I don't want to spend too much time talking about it. The Midnight Masks, I think it's still one of the best. I'm torn between amazing and one of the best for Midnight Masks. I think it just does the concept so well, and it is a high point in Arkham, but I don't really know. I don't really know if I like it as much as I did previously. I think the scenario is it can't be below amazing, but my gut has like dropped on it over time. Now that I've seen some of the new things that these new scenarios are doing, or like the tension for it, the mini game is less appealing for me in terms of what it was previously. And it might be just because I've played it a lot. It is still a really good scenario. I think I'm still going to put it in one of the best, though. It is like a top tier scenario. I think like it's really good.
Fatality.
Hey, Javier Altman, thank you so much for the Twitch Prime at the Golden Table. The word on that was a little bit weird for me, but thank you, Javier, for supporting the channel. Much appreciated. Yeah, I also think Midnight Masks has kind of fallen out of grace a little bit because of the card pool. I think that the card pool is less, it makes it a little bit easier than it was back in the day. So going back to that buddy of mine where we played this, and I was Trish and he was Tommy, we got like, I think we full cleared it on his blind play. And this wasn't just me pulling all my weight. He actually played like a very good game of Arkham Horror. So much so that like there was this moment when he went out of his way to kill his accursed follower, and I was like, you can do that? You can actually kill your weakness on the board? Like, you can actually just, like, solve your problems and not let them just accrue negative value for you over time? And I was like, we full cleared it for his blind play. So I think that's just, like, a testament to how I think that this scenario is, like, a little bit, its appeal is kind of gone a little bit because of the card pool. The Connie Pinham, I've been watching for a few months. I dive into Arkham more and more. Choose from Edinburgh. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, let's go to the Devourer below. I also think that this one's difficulty is kind of overstated as well now with a full collection. But I do think it's still just kind of an annoying scenario. I don't think it has like an appealing hook. I think the woods mechanic of it isn't that great. So I'm going to be putting it in the annoying tier, mostly just because I feel like it's missing that thing that makes the scenario actually somewhat interesting in retrospect, you know? It's a cool scenario. I should get some light on me. The clouds are crazy in the sky today. It's a tough blind play. I like how there is the twist with the what's her name? Lita? That's her name. Lita Chandler, right? Where you can seek the ending that way, you can try to fight the Ancient One to go through it. But I do think that, like, beyond that, there's really nothing exciting that happens in the scenario, and I think it's kind of just mechanically, the woods thing is really annoying, and you can tell that's like early design thing. So yeah, I'm gonna be putting this one in the annoying tier, mostly just because I don't really enjoy it. It's missing like that spice that makes it feel special. All right, on to the Dunwich Legacy here. We got extracurricular activity. This one's also, I think, just fine. I think it's just a fine scenario. It's a great intro scenario, right? I think that extracurricular activity is a great, if you're, at this point now, if you're looking at someone who has played more Arkham and you have more time, I think that this is a good way to start as opposed to The Gathering, which might sound, you know, sacrilegious, but I do think that Arkham doesn't get really interesting until you have a full, like, 6+ really campaign scenario experience through a campaign to really upgrade your deck. It has a little bit of annoying luck factors with Jazz Mulligan and lower player counts, but I'm not going to knock it too much because of that. I had a really unlucky run of it very recently, like a very unlucky run, but I think overall there's I like the Miskatonic University campus. I think that's kind of just like a cool location for it. I guess I agree. I also like how the different branching paths you can take to end it is also really nice. I wish they would do more stuff like this. Just a nice, simple scenario that has like a nice little branching path to go with it. Yeah, I'm going to go with extracurricular activity. Fine. Now, we're going to go to the House Always Wins. I'm going to put this one a tier above extracurricular activity. I think this is a good scenario. It's one of those things that the mechanical twist of it of it, the gambling in the front is really good. Like, when we first played this one and that showed up, I was like, oh shit, this is actually like kind of the reason why we want to do this. This is like actually like why we want to like have a story be told while we're playing, and this through its mechanics are telling a story, and that was really exciting the first time I played it. I have some things that I want to like complain about it. I don't like that if you do it second and the goon and like the monsters show up, you still have to gamble, right? I feel like you have to like gamble through the first act if you haven't completed it yet. I think if this was designed today, that would be fixed. You know, there would be like a downside if you didn't do there in time and the spheres showed up. So I think like that's a little bit of a flavor dissonance, which I don't particularly enjoy. But it's a very stressful scenario, and I like going for the saving Peter Clover ending, and I think that's like exciting. Like when that's still like a little bit touch and go on if we're able to achieve it, I think is really cool, and I think a testament for why The House Always Wins is a good scenario. Going on to the Miskatonic Museum, I think this scenario, I think I put it in the I don't like playing it at all, but I'm gonna put it into annoying, which is not, it sounds like it doesn't sound like an upgrade, but it is, you know? I'm a little bit like higher on it since recently. I'm actually kind of like higher on Dunwich as a whole because it's just simple Arkham, and that's a good time. I understand the complaint that we even had on our own channel about how it gives it gives the goon nothing to do, but my Uno reverse card for that is, why do you have nothing to do, right? Why does your deck suck? Like, why are you bad at building a deck that does nothing when there's no monsters, right? So, like, I think that on your blind play, yes, that is the fault of the scenario, right? Because you are expected to bring something that can deal with enemies as the goon. That's what you kind of want to do. There's only one goon in here. But if you complain about that every time you play the Miskatonic Museum, that is a you problem. Like, if you're like, I'm the goon and I have nothing to do in Miskatonic Museum, what the hell are you doing, right? Like, why can't you just put some clue cards or some ways to get clues in your deck and then upgrade out of them as you get past Miskatonic Museum, right? So that's why, like, I'm a little bit like softer on Miskatonic Museum than I was earlier, because as I started to build my decks differently for Miskatonic Museum, or find different ways on how to manage the Haunter in the Dark, or whatever his name is, I realized that this scenario actually can be really fun, and it can be really enjoyable to try to full clear it. I still don't think it's a great scenario, or even like a good scenario. I still think it's like below average, but I'm going to be leaving it out of the I don't like playing it at all tier, because I have found what I did enjoy about it. It's just a little bit boring when you go past that, but I'm talking about the positives from what it left this. So yeah, to answer your question as well, this tier, like the I don't like playing it at all, is I think that I consider this scenario to be a bad scenario. It's just my polite Canadian way of saying it. All right, we're gonna go to Essex County Express. I think that this scenario is good. I think it's like very stressful, and I think the design on it has weaknesses, which I think is like totally a fair criticism. I think there are some big glaring issues with the mechanical design of like the Ancient Evils and the Cultists, especially in higher player counts, and I think that is a fair criticism to put on Essex County Express. However, with all that said, the scenario is actually just like a banger. Like, it's a really good scenario. It's tense, it's scary, it changes the pace in which you play Arkham. So my favorite thing about Arkham is when different scenarios have different paces, like a different like tempo that you need to provide the game. I'm using not tempo in the sense that we normally do, but like in the pace of which you play your turn kind of tempo can really like change from scenario to scenario. And this one does it without adding any complexity. If Essex was printed today, we would rip it to shreds. From the design, yes. I think from the design, yeah, that's issues. However, at the same time, like, I have never had that happen to me even in 4-player. So, like, it can happen, but it also cannot happen. But I don't think, like, that's a fair thing that removes, like, how the scenario is actually just good. Because it tells stories so well. And it goes, like, it just works really... It's just a good scenario. The enemies are tough. The encounter cards are terrifying. I think if Essex was printing today, we would rip it to shreds because people want their hands held when they're playing Arkham. They don't like it when things are tough. They don't like it that they can, like, just randomly lose because they spend 4 turns playing assets. Or, like, their clue getter can't compress clues, right? Yes, there are issues with the design, but those issues with the design, I think, are... People remember when it happens because it sucks, but, like, they don't remember the times where, like, Essex County Express was a nice solid scenario that they were able to tense their way through it because people suck, you know? I think people are just bad at, like, people are just inherently negative and they only remember the times where it sucks. And that seems like a rough life to live, my friend. I think that's just a bummer. No Return 2 of these as well. Return 2 suck. We're not talking about them. All right. Next up, we're going to go to Blood on the Altar. And I love this scenario, but I do think I'm going to drop it down to the amazing. I think previously it's been at one of the best for me. I think it's just like the scenario itself is still just like really my opinion on it will just always be tainted by my first play, which was round 1 loss. But just shuffle up and mulligan again. Like, who cares, right? Like, who cares? Like, why are you holding on to that still? Says the man who can't get over Skids almost wanting him to quit Arkham. But still, right? Like, I say it in jest because I don't actually hate Skids. I just hate how Skids made me feel one time, and it's fun to joke about because I have to choose 5 bottom investigators. But, like, why does it matter? Why does it matter? Was Blood on the Altar top last year? I don't know. I don't remember. I didn't really look at my list. But I'm always high on Blood on the Altar. I think the card is just like... The scenario, is actually just, like, really flavorful, really good. And it's mechanically very simple. It tells a great story. The sacrificing stuff is really cool as well. And it's just a great time. Why am I dropping it down a tier from, like, it might have been an amazing last year, I don't remember. I think it's just because I've played it a bunch this year and it wasn't as it's kind of like very swingy with, like, if you can crush it or not, and then, like, it's can sometimes be a little bit too easy, so I wish it was, like, a little bit harder. I wish that the sacrifice things was actually just a little bit more aggressive in retrospect, but I still think Blood on the Altar is a sweet scenario, and it's a good time. On to Undimensioned and Unseen. Honestly, I'm doing it again. I'm gonna put it up here. I actually, honestly, I think this scenario is annoying as hell, mostly because of the random enemy chance, but it is a very fun, like, it's very fun to try to do better. It's fun to have that hope at the get-go, and see that, like, maybe this one is gonna be good. It's awful on blind playthroughs. I don't agree with that. I think it's a fun challenge on blind playthroughs. Here's the thing. I think that the game provides you with a lot of tools to make the low brain work. I played a solo Finn in Undimensioned and Unseen, and I was able to defeat some of the brood of Yog-Sothoth. It's very possible, but again, people don't like adapting their gameplay experience to the challenges set out by the scenario. They just want to have their goon swing the hammer and win. Like, that's like what it usually ends up coming down to, right? Notably as well, to go against the awful blind playthroughs, it still blows my mind. This is Eric's this is Eric's favorite scenario in Arkham right now. So, like, I disagree with the sense that the blind play of it can be, like, it can be surprising, but I think that it's a nice twist on the format. But in my defense, I played it blind when Dunwich was the only card pool. I fucking did too! I think that this is the one that, like, I know Travis and Bryn like the variety that the Return to ones provide. I'm fine to play with just the Broods. It's very flavorful and cool. My biggest gripe with it is that it sucks that everything is randomized. I don't like that. I get that it works for the flavor of them, like they're just like wandering around. It's one of those things that it makes sense, but I don't enjoy when like pieces move around randomly because you can't like plan for it. Which again, I understand is the point, but it adds so much to the playtime to also like have to like shuffle the cards, move them. Luckily, it's a lot easier on Tabletop Simulator and all that. Yeah, I think that the card, it's actually like, I don't think it's a good scenario. Like it's not even in fine. I still think it's below average, but I actually do enjoy playing it enough that I'm going to put it in annoying as opposed to I don't like playing it at all. Huh. Okay. Where Doom Awaits. I think I'm going to put this one down here. Onto the I think that this is an actively bad scenario. And a big reason for that is just because like nothing interesting happens. So like the big difference between this, like, so you might be like, that's crazy, Undimensioned and Unseen better than Where Doom Awaits? Yeah, because Undimensioned and Unseen at least tries something, you know? You at least, like, try, like, there's at least, like, something that happens in the scenario that tries to, like, do something to the investigators. This one has a gigantic Doom Clock, and, like, it has, a gigantic Doom Clock, and it has just the biggest Mythos deck at the time. And it's one of those things that it's just like it's not really interesting. And then even when you're like going through the scenario and playing the scenario, you're kind of just like, okay, I'm gonna spawn to location. I have to move in. In my middle action, my second action, so I don't trigger if you have no action remainings, or for each action remaining, I have to balance it out. And it kind of just becomes like a little bit of a slog. And then you get to the top of the hill, and there's actually like nothing interesting that happens at the top of the hill. Like maybe if it was a bit more interesting, I'd give this scenario a little bit more leeway. But I do feel like it's the first one that's like in Dunwich where I can't find any saving grace that makes it at least somewhat, at least more annoying than I don't like playing it at all. All right, Lost in Time and Space, the final scenario here for the Dunwich Legacy. I know Travis is really high on this one. He likes it a lot. I think it's like one of his favorite, or like, I mean, it might be. Things have changed. Opinions changed, right? I think it's a great scenario, though. I'm going to put it up in great. I don't think it's amazing. I think the mechanics of the different locations are really good. One thing that I love about this scenario, is that it's so simple to set up. Like, especially now in the days, in recent scenarios, where a lot of the final scenarios feel like two scenarios merged together, right? It's like it just like jams them all together, and like this one actually just feels like a nice simple final scenario. It's going to be a big complaint that we're going to see coming into like some of these ones over here, is that it feels like there's too much happening in the final scenario, and I think they would be better if they just split them into two scenarios. Lost in Time and Space, though, is a perfectly elegant final scenario that feels like a final scenario with a unique mechanical identity. Locations in the encounter deck is sick. I agree with Stu Dunsparce. It is a very sick mechanic. There's some tension to it. It has an encounter card that can just ruin your day. It's a really very, very, very good scenario. I think Lost in Time and Space is a great time. Let's go on to Carcosa. My personal favorite campaign still. It is still my favorite campaign. So we're going to talk about it. And we're going to probably go through this one pretty quick because I'm going to be quite positive through this. So, Curtain Call. I think this is the best opening scenario in the game. Maybe not. I think I'm going to put it in... I don't know if I don't want to... I'm going to put it in great. I don't think it's amazing. I think there is one better scenario, opening scenario, I think, for me. But, it's... sorry, the curtain call is just a really good, scary opening scenario. Like, when you have to, like, think how many times am I going to have to kill Big Butt Baby, it becomes a very, like, scary thing where you're like, we can do it once, no problem. We can do it twice, pretty good. 3 times starts to get a little bit tricky. My problem with Curtain Call, I think what's knocking it down from amazing, is that the horror on locations never feels enjoyable to play. I never get it. I don't like the mechanic of the spreading horror. I don't like that kind of thing. It's kind of just like a little bit of a weird squiggle on top of a scenario that is otherwise really tight and really good. I like the enemies in the encounter set. I like all the introduction to like the hidden stuff, the fact that sanity matters. I think Curtain Call does a good job of teasing what the whole thing's about, which I'm going to also another note on that. So I think the biggest change that I don't like in the new big box format, where each campaign is in their own box, is that it feels like there's less of a thing where you're like introduced to a mechanic that is going to be throughout like the encounter decks, because they have to reuse those starting cards over and over and over again. Like, it still happens. That could be because of the box format, or it could be because the mechanical identity feels a little bit less distinct in the newer stuff. But I think that's like a really good selling point for Curtain Call. On to the Last King. This is the party where everyone goes crazy. I think it's an amazing scenario. I don't think it's one of the best. I'm trying to be like a little bit more tight with my one of the best this year. I really like the Last King. It has some some design issues that they fixed in the Return to, but like, who cares too much? I'm not going to knock too much about how Diane Divine, or whatever her name is, doesn't really like function as intended in the game. So like, I'm not going to knock it too much for that. I'll never forget my blind play of the Last King when Ishimaru turned into the Centipede Man from Resident Evil. Like, that was top tier Arkham. That was like juicy. I was I actually haven't had an experience like that until Hemlock again, so spoiler alert, I'm going to be high on Hemlock once we get to it. Both the scenario and the whatever Hemlock is, the plant. Yeah, Last King's really good though. It's a very, very, very strong scenario as well, so I'm going to be putting it up there. All right, Echoes of the Past. So I'm a little bit conflicted between these two, okay? I'm a little bit conflicted between I don't like playing it at all and annoying. And the reason for that is that it is a very boring scenario, and it requires your first turn as your goon to be really good. But it's very fun when you get ahead and you can just kind of like have your deck do its thing over and over and over again, because you have nothing but time, right? So you just get to like play your deck, and like your deck gets to like, you get to set everything up, and then you're like, I'm God, right? Like, because I can do everything because I have nothing but time. With that said though, I don't think that is actually I actually think that's not a positive, so I am going to be dropping it down to the I think this is another actively bad scenario. It's too swingy, I think. Not in a way like, I mean, like Essex County Express is swingy because of the design issues with it. But I mean, I will also say that this one is also swingy because of the design issues for it, but there's not like an interesting twist, that makes it worth the time to play it. And that's kind of like the big issue with Echoes of the Past, right? Where it just doesn't feel worth it, right? It's just like not a great time because of that. And it just, you get there and you're like, oh, okay, I guess I'll play Echoes of the Past. And then you play it and you're like, well, that was definitely something. And then you just go to the Unspeakable Oath, which is one of the best scenarios in the game. For a lot of reasons. It's tense, for reasons of player elimination. It's flavorful. The encounter deck is really cool. It is paced very well. It has scary monsters that can appear. Treacheries are surprisingly hard in this one. It can hit at the wrong time to just absolutely ruin your day. And it has a fun little jailbreak type thing, which is really enjoyable to play with. We used to come around to calling it my favorite scenario. Unspeakable Oath? Hell yeah. I think it's probably my favorite scenario too. It's very good. It's Oath or Light in the Fog. Yeah, that's probably my number 1 and my number 2. Like, yeah, like those are very good scenarios. I am also glad that Eric did get to get locked in the asylum. I'm also glad that Eric was able to get locked in the asylum because of delving too deep. Like, it was like actually just the perfect reminder that, hey, you shouldn't be able to always expect to get out, especially if like the scenario is dictating that you might not get out, right? Because I mean, like, what happens if you get eliminated when you're in the asylum? Well, maybe you were supposed to be there the entire time, right? And I think that's really cool. So I think that this is just a top tier scenario. My personal favorite, probably, and it is one of the best. We're going to go on to a Phantom of Truth next, which I think is... I'm a little bit torn on this one, because I think the design on this scenario is very exceptional. The question is, does that translate to a scenario that's great to play or just good to play? I think I'm going to go with my gut. I'm going to say this is a great scenario. It's very tense. It's very scary depending on the version you get. When you get the Doom that stacks up and Aspire's Carcosa shows up and you're like, we can't deal with this, so we have to survive 2 more turns. I think that there is... It's a really enjoyable experience, both chasing him and surviving him. I like both of them a lot. It's like it's asking how do you spend your resources and all that? Like, how do you spend them? How do you like, when do you try to evade the guy? When do you try to add Doom to it? When can I spend this time to get rid of these Spires of Carcosa, etc., etc.? What the hell? Yeah, I think that this is it's also based on a great short story, my personal favorite in the King in Yellow short story collection. It's one of those things where, like, if you ask me where it falls on good or great, it depends, but I think it is one of the best design scenarios of Arkham as a whole, mostly because how it can change what you need to do with very little work put into it in terms of setup and mechanical headspace required. A lot of this stuff now, you could potentially see things where, like, this would require a completely different thing. And this is like 6 cards in the encounter deck, and depending on which version of which side of the card is face up. So I think that's why it's getting that extra bonuses, because it is a very well-designed scenario. On to the Pallid Mask. This one is going to be a great scenario as well. The Catacombs are awesome, man! The Catacombs are awesome, and there's a lot of similarities that you've actually seen that this spreads into future scenarios as well. Just the map layout system is genius. It's very good, it's very elegant, and it just feels right. And it shows up a lot, the same map mechanic in custom scenarios as well. And it's always a very enjoyable time. I love how there's the small differences in how the scenario feels. How the scenario feels depending on the way the map falls into place, right? It's just one of those things where it's those small little things that make it so that Carcosa is as replayable as it is. That's why I personally like Carcosa so much, because that there is so much diversity in how the scenarios can play with small little things without requiring any additional choices or setup to go with it, which I think is really, really nice. On next, we got the Black Star's Rise. I think it's a good scenario. I might put it down to fine, but I think our recent experience with it have been very enjoyable. So like I'm a little bit feeling a little bit better on it because of that. I used to want more out of the mechanic where to know which direction is the right way to go, right? And I think overall you can at least now solve it. I do wish that's a puzzle gamer in me, though. I wish there was like something else you could do to solve it. But ultimately, I'm okay. I'm less critical on that aspect of it than I was earlier when I was first talking about the scenario. It has a fun push your luck mechanic. It has some treacheries that just absolutely can ruin your day, which I enjoy. I like it when the treachery deck can actually like make you a little bit scared of what you're going to draw. That's always enjoyable. It has a few memory issues for me that kind of knock it a little bit more. Yeah, I think it's a good scenario though. So we're gonna put it up in there, and then we're gonna go to Dim Carcosa, which I think is just another great finale. I don't think it's amazing. I think it's a great scenario though. My most recent runs of it has been very bad. I've been very bad because I just sucked. Like, my 2 Gauntlet runs, slight spoilers for the Gauntlet that's currently on the channel, it did not go well. It did not go well. And then also Eric's run, and we didn't even make it in, in the draft run that we did. So it's one of those things where, Dim Carcosa is... I still think it's great because of that, but I just actually haven't been able to experience Dim Carcosa in a way that actually matters. So I'm looking forward to playing it again and actually like maybe winning it this time. But recently my Dim Carcosa experience hasn't been that successful, but I still think the scenario is pretty damn great. All right, on to the Forgotten Age. And we got the Untamed Wilds. This is a very enjoyable first scenario just because it's really hard, but at the same time, it's incredibly annoying because of the same issues that the Essex County Express has, where it just... Ancient Evils probably shouldn't be shuffled in when the Doom threshold is not really accounting for it. Like, it accounts for one... Like, a good example is comparing Untamed Wilds to Ice and Death, you know? Where you don't reshuffle those Ancient Evils, so you're unlikely to see them unless you're playing 4 players multiple times, right? And because of that, it feels a little bit annoying that like the way the deck shuffles can really change things. However, with all that said, I still think that this is a good opening scenario. I think it's also still a good scenario as a whole. It does set the tone for the entire campaign very well. You are right about that. And it's one of those things where like it's a very menacing thing, and it has a lot of things that hang over you. The agenda flip on the poison, the snakes, Ishtaka, these are all scary things that really resonate with it. What keeps it from being a great scenario for me personally? That's a good question. And I probably should answer it if I'm making a tier list, right? Like, what keeps it out of great? I think a big thing is just that, for me personally, the explore mechanic is never, apart from like Depths of Yoth, is never like actually a fun mechanic to interact with. Even with the return to, I think the explore mechanic is still just like not an enjoyable mechanic to play with. I actually never play with the return to rules because I actually prefer the original. I think the original is actually easier to manage than the return to rules are. Which might sound crazy to a lot of people, but think about it, right? Just think about it for a bit. When does it change the stress point, and what does it do to the stress point, right? Just think about it for a little bit. What does it change? What does the return to one change? It makes you feel better at the beginning by taking out any sort of control you have of what's in there, right? It's one of those things that I think that you actually can game the original ones better than you can game the return to ones. Because now with the return to ones, you don't know who can explore, because what if there's an enemy? So now your Seeker can't explore safely anymore. Your Guardian needs to do it. When before, your Seeker with high brain can be like, yeah, I'm just going to throw myself against this because I have wrote down what's in here, and I know that we only have the brain test one in there, right? But that's a good thing. I agree it's a good thing in terms of... I think it's a good thing in terms of like giving the players like a little bit more freedom in the get-go to get the ground running. I agree. But when it comes to spike power gaming, the original is better. And because that's who I am, that's what I play, right? So the difference is that there's no cards in the Explore deck. There's no encounter cards. When you explore, you shuffle the top card into the Explore deck without looking at it. So like it really comes down to like the flavor feel of what you want. I think like honestly, my true advice is switch between which Explore rules you play, depending on how you feel at the start of the scenario. But if you do want a power game, I do think that the original version is actually the correct choice. So that's why I usually always choose it. But I just think as a whole, Explore is a neat mechanic, but I don't think it's a good mechanic. And I think that's why, like, I'm not super hyped on Forgotten Age, as a whole, compared to some other stuff. Even though I do think it's a good scenario, its highs are really high. Sorry, it's a good campaign. Its highs are really high, but I think that its lows are actually pretty low. The Doom of Etzli. Honestly, I think this is another good scenario. My recent experiences with Doom of Etzli have been very fun, mostly just because it's stressful. I like being stressed when I'm playing Arkham. It's more enjoyable than being able to just like stomp my way through it, right? It has the issues with Explorer, as I mentioned in the Untamed Wilds, which I think keeps it from like really popping off for me personally. But with that said, it's still just like a good time. I think it's better than fine for sure, because it has something that makes it interesting. I think that's kind of like where I really want from my Arkham now, is I want like just something that makes the scenario feel interesting, you know? And in a way that's like, it's like it just automatically makes them like even just a tier above, right? Like last year, like maybe Doom of Etzli was probably fine for me on the tier list, but this year I just think like I've played it a bunch. I think it's good, and I think it holds up really well in replays because of how stressful it is, and it's really fun to also try to cheese it and game it as go through there. I like it. I think it's a good scenario. The escape always feels very fun and stressful if you're not like actually just cheesing it, which is really fun to do as well. Yeah, I like me some Doom of Etzli. I think it's a good scenario. Threads of Fate. You know what? I don't like playing this one at all. Just kidding. It's one of the best. It's one of the best scenarios in the game, man. Threads of Fate is insanely good. It's like insanely good. The design on it is really nice. It kind of makes you, it's like Midnight Masks. It's a great test scenario. It's my favorite one to stand alone. It's fun to test your mettle against it because the encounter deck also does a really good job of ensuring that you are tested that you're tested from top to bottom all over the place. And it's also really fun to make progress because it's very easy to make progress at the beginning, and then it becomes a nice challenge in trying to get everything done near the end in a campaign play. It's very easy to do in standalone, but that doesn't count. But it's very enjoyable to try to chase as many as you can in campaign play, which is a very enjoyable experience. Threads of Fate is just a banger from top to bottom. The Boundary Beyond. All right. I'm going to put this in good. I think it's a good scenario, which is crazy. Because I know that this one, for me, I put in the I don't like playing this one at all previously. But I've come around hard on the Boundary Beyond. And a big reason for that is twofold. Number one, I've realized that you can game the Explore deck. You can game the Explore deck and you can take advantage of it. Number two, you only need to get 3 paths and it's a win. And that's really changed things for me. It's a hard scenario. It's very hard. And it can be very swingy to go with it, depending on how things fall into place. But with all that said, it provides an enjoyable challenge that is doable if you just play well. So it's one of those things where now I can look back at the Boundary Beyond, and I don't blame the scenario anymore because I've grown as a person. I've realized that when things go wrong in Arkham, it's actually because of my fault and not because of the scenario. For most cases, we can look at Essex County Express and some Untamed Wilds for that as well. It's one of those things where it's just that it is an enjoyable challenge, that it's fun to try to do as best as you can. It has a cool boss. That really, if you can try to beat or you can try to gain clues, it's like an enjoyable second half that you actually have to like work towards. And it's one of those things where just because the scenario punches you in the nuts doesn't mean that the scenario is actually bad. It just means that you might be a little bit bad. And that's okay because you can like get better. And that's kind of like how Boundary Beyond has changed for me, because I realized that it is a scenario that's all about testing your skill in managing threats, looking at your action assessment, and trying to come out on top. And because of that, it's one of those things what has made it better for me. Next year it might change again. Like I don't like playing it at all, but I kind of look forward to Boundary Beyond now. Albeit it is still a frustrating experience, but when you look through that frustration, you can actually see that there's something to find here. And it's just a matter if you want to push yourself to try and achieve it. Because I mean, like, honestly, one of my biggest annoyances when you see like stuff like Undimensioned and Unseen, where it's just like I just resign on the first action because why play it? Honestly, stop playing Arkham. if that's your logic, you should just like go play another game, right? Because these scenarios are existing they're existing to test your thing. Just play a different campaign if you don't like Undimensioned, Unseen. If you don't like Boundary Beyond, go do something else. But if you want to try to be better, just be better, right? That's how I look at it. And I think it's a great scenario for testing that as well, because it hits hard. Heart of the Elders Part 1. I think this one's still a bad scenario, even though I have found more success with it recently. I just think that it doesn't have it's not like Boundary Beyond, where there's like an interesting hook to it, where it's like the time travel stuff. It's basically just like a worse Untamed Wilds without something that actually makes it so if your hook of your scenario is you can play the scenario multiple times, that's probably not a great hook, right? We can all agree on that. That's not really like a enjoyable sort of gameplay experience. And then like there are some neat enemies. I like the Apex Strangleweed. I like the treachery that places the poison mushrooms around. I like the basilisk that shuffles back in if you put a pillar down. I think like all that stuff is really cool, but as a whole, the scenario is kind of just like a low point in. It's probably the lowest point for me in there, and I think that does continue into Heart of the Elders Part 2. I'm gonna put it in fine for Heart of the Elders Part 2. Actually, I think I'm going to drop it into annoying. Because it is just like a worse Doom of Edsley. Like, Heart of the Elders is just like... It's routinely our least viewed scenarios in the Forgotten Age. And I wonder why that is. Because they're just kind of like... They're both half scenarios that are just retreads of two scenarios that are just better than them. Right? And I don't think that is... There's just like what is there in Heart of the Elders that's interesting, right? Like what is there in Heart of the Elders that's interesting that doesn't happen in the Doom of Edsley, right? Like it doesn't even have like a cool escape sequence. It's literally just empty the doom or clues on this final location, right? And you do that by getting clues. Yes, the Harbinger shows up again, but like we've seen the Harbinger before, right? Like we saw him literally in the Doom of Edsley when it was a much scarier experience because like, you know, we were weaker. And, I mean, don't get me wrong, the Harbinger is still scary, but, I don't know, I just think, I mean, it's not a bad scenario, because, like, Heart of the Elders Part 2 is still just, like, it's actually just Arkham, but it's not an enjoyable experience for me, so I'm going to put it in annoying. The City of Archives, probably... one of the most contentious scenarios. Do we still think that's true? Do we still think the City of Archives is probably one of the most contentious scenarios in the Arkham community still? It's gotta be, right? People hate getting their character taken away from them. How do I feel about this one? Yes, my girlfriend won't play Forgotten Age all because of the Yithians. She just hates Yithians, huh? I get it. I also hate Yithians. Where do I want to put this one? I think it's a very well-designed scenario. The numbers on it are very doable, no matter what your deck is. Admittedly, I will say it does suck. I actually don't care about losing my character. I don't care about that, but I do have some empathy for the people who complain about losing the items in your deck, right? Like your unique items, right? Like I understand that. Because like if you you don't pay experience for your investigator card, right? Unless you're Lily Chen, I guess. But even then, like it's one of those things where like who cares about your investigator card? But if you put 10 experience into a red clock, just let the kids have them, right? Like I understand and I relate to that. I think my big issue with the City of Archives is that I think it becomes less enjoyable the more you've played it. Because it actually is pretty standard stuff. It's like a pretty standard scenario. And like once you get past the hook of you're a Yithian, nothing too interesting actually happens. And I understand the hook of that scenario is you're a Yithian. I understand that. But I think I'm only going to put this one in good this year. I don't think I'm as high on City of Archives as I was previously. I don't think it's a bad scenario. I think it's like been amazing, great to good. I have no problem again with like the Yithian thing. It's not because of that. I just think that the scenario is when you strip it all down, is just a little bit less enjoyable. But I think it's very doable no matter what. It's not going to cripple you because the tests are designed around you having your 2 and your 4. Like, yes, maybe on higher difficulties, but that doesn't count. That doesn't count to me. That's not part of my conversation. Is Audacity? Yeah, you're good. Yeah, it's Audacity. It's like you're very just the spelling's wrong, but your Audacity is a word, and it's it fits perfectly for here because City of Archives does have the Audacity. Depths of Yoth. This is a killer scenario, and I think it's one of the best. Mechanically, it's so cool. It's also like, I think, as I said previously, the best implementation of the Explore deck. And that might be because the Explore deck like doesn't have any threats in it unless you're playing the Return to with that one card that actually is like not too scary. But I think it's just because it feels mechanically right, and it doesn't feel like it just doesn't feel like annoying to play with it, you know? Is there no ranking inside tiers? I might do the top tier, but no, I'm ranking inside. Like, this video is already we're already like almost an hour in, and we're not even halfway through. So like I don't like to rank within the tiers because then we get even like it gets too much. Yeah, I just think Depths of Yoth is a fantastic scenario. It's, to me, the finale of Forgotten Age. I don't care about Shattered Aeons. I don't like Shattered Aeons. I don't think Shattered Aeons is a fun scenario to play. So, like, Depths of Yoth is where it ends to me, and then I just play Shattered Aeons because I'm like, maybe we'll win. Maybe we'll try to win and see what we can do. Maybe we'll talk to Alejandro this time. But I think Depths of Yoth is like it and Threads of Fate are 2 amazing, amazing scenarios, and I really enjoy them. Depths of Yoth has a big bad. Why even has Shattered Aeons? I think so. Part of that is, I mean, I understand it's because they have Ishtaka and Alejandro, but I think it was kind of a meta thing too, because in Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, Yig's just a guy you can shoot with a gun. So like he's like not the main thing for it, but I do agree it was a bit of a fault. I'm going to put Shattered Aeons in annoying. This comes down to personal preference. There's nothing I can think of that's fun in Shattered Aeons that makes me actually want to look forward to it. I don't like it. I just was saying, like, I don't enjoy the explore mechanic. I don't like the horror or damage when there's clues there. It's just kind of like more annoying to play with, and it is like an interesting challenge. But you can do it. You can like get over. No turn back time in the tier list? Nah, it's not real. It can't hurt you. It's cool. It's a good climax to the story of the whole campaign, but it's one that like I play it and I'm happy it's over, and I don't really care if I win or lose unless I'm like trying to go for like some gauntlet stats. I'm kind of just like riding it out, trying my best, and then it hits a certain point and I'm like, okay, I think I got this, or okay, I think this is over, but we're just gonna go through it. Yeah, I don't like Shattered Aeons. Okay, I think we're on the Circle Undone now, if my math is right. If everything looks good, I think we're the Disappearance of the Twilight Estate. Honestly, I'm gonna move this one higher than it was last year. I think it's a fine scenario. I think it might even have been Holy Helicopter who said this, where it's reminiscent of like the those Magic the Gathering, how do you solve this board state and kill your opponent puzzles? And it is. It's basically a puzzle of how efficient can you be at getting to the result that you want, right? which is cool. And it makes I actually had fun playing it with Eric in Eric's blind play. And I think we might even do it again if Eric and I do a rerun of Circle Undone. I actually think I might even do it for my next run of Circle Undone. Maybe for the Gauntlet. However, it's not really what was I going to say? Oh, it's not really good for YouTube, right? It's not really good for YouTube to include it. I could just include it at the start of the video, but it kind of just like kills analytics a little bit. And I think that it's not like enjoyable enough. Like the preludes, which I do enjoy from Feast of Hemlock Vale. I'm not going to listen to the chatter who is spewing such negativity. Unlike the preludes, which I think are actually like enjoyable to play, because the preludes are all about setting up your mulligan. Well, this is like a different sort of thing that doesn't actually really matter, you know? So you could do a highlight reel supercut. I would love to edit videos, but I don't really have when you release as many Arkham videos as I do, I can't. Like 7 videos a week, editing becomes a little bit more of an issue to get in there as much as I do. It is a neat idea if I released less videos, but I like doing I like the Northern Lion approach, just Gatling gun videos out there. Yeah, but I think like I'm higher on it than I was previously. The Witching Hour. Okay, I don't really like Circle Undone. And I think that's going to translate to a lot of these ratings. I just, like, don't get it. I think that the mechanical identity of the campaign, which is treacheries in your threat area that cause you to change things, is neat. But I don't think it really resonates with what I want out of Arkham, which is... I prefer effects that like hit harder, but then like you don't have to do like memory issues to go with it. Maybe if I streamed less, like and like had to like talk while playing less, it would be easier to keep track of, because I could be like, oh yes, this. Justin was so happy to hear Eric hated the Circle Undone during the campaign summary video. I mean, I could not. I was a giddy little boy, wasn't I? I was a giddy little like hee. My friend also thinks the same. Albeit Eric disliked it for different reasons than I did. Eric disliked it because of the story. I think the story is... I understand the criticisms for it, but I'm kind of like okay with it. I do think though, if I put my bias aside, I do think the Witching Hour is a good scenario. It's tense. I like the split up mechanic. I think the split up mechanic is really cool. And it's tense. The goat spawns that show up from the Shubby and Agent set is really cool. Yeah, I have to take my bias out of it. I have to take my bias out of this and like approach it just from a rational thing. I think it's pretty comparable to these, like to the Untamed Wilds and the Witching Hour, and the Doom of Etsley. I think Curtain Call is a better opening scenario than it, so I'm going to put it over here. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. We go on to At Death's Doorstep, which I also think is a good scenario. Maybe I don't. Maybe I do actually like... Maybe I do actually like Circle Undone. Maybe I need to like do some introspection and be like, wait a minute. Am I actually like hot on this shit? Am I actually like for it? I don't know. We'll find out. At Death's Doorstep is a cool scenario. I like the Silver Twilight Lodge sides of this a lot more than I like the than the witch side. I hated it at first, like when you draw the monsters, it changes the pace of how you do things, but like whenever you draw a monster, you instead put a Doom on the agenda and put that monster aside. I used to hate that, but I actually kind of like it now. I like the tension that it brings when you can like go through the Mythos phase and suddenly you're like, okay, we have a little bit of a problem where we just Ancient Eviled ourselves. I think it could be better and more elegant, like just be a little bit like on the back end, kind of just like there could have been something changed about it, I think, to make it a little bit less of a feeling of how it is on the blind play. But I don't want, maybe that could be wrong because I enjoy how it is a stressful thing and can be a little bit overwhelming. I don't like the Spectral Watcher. I talked about that within the Eric video, but my problem with the Spectral Watcher is it's kind of just like a bad version of the Harbinger of Volusia. And actually, like, Circle Undone is kind of just like a retread, actually, of the Forgotten Age, which is a little bit crazy. I thought I didn't like Circle Undone, and then found I liked all the individual scenarios, so I don't know how or why I'm lying to myself. So I think the issue is that the campaign sucks. I think, like, the individual scenarios, there's like not many stinkers, but I don't think there's many scenarios that are actually great, you know? And I think that's kind of the problem, where for me personally, there's no scenario that I look at and I'm like, I can't wait to play that one, except for maybe the Before the Black Throne or whatever it's called, right? I think like the campaign is just bad, but the scenarios aren't terrible. Like, the lows aren't as low as some of the other ones, right? Yeah, but I think the Storm Step is a good scenario. The Secret Name. I used to love this one, but I think it's just fine now. I don't really look forward to it anymore. I used to really like this scenario. I only enjoy it playing with Travis and Bryn when we do the Brown Jenkins counter. I used to be a lot higher on the Secret Name. It used to be like one that I actually enjoyed playing. I think the design, I say this every time it comes up. I think it's like the best designed with those rats, man. The swarm of rats that just gets stronger as it goes. And that's like kind of amazing design. But it's not enough for me to actually like the it's kind of like, that's kind of like why it kind of falters. A lot of people, when it first came out, compared actually, it's funny, they compared this and the Wages of Sin to a fixed Miskatonic and a fixed Undimensioned and Unseen. But I think over time they're not really the same. Like, they're not really like fixed anymore. They're kind of just like different versions of it. It's also really easy to win. Like, it's very easy to just prepare to just win, so that like kind of sucks the tension out of it. Yeah, but it is kind of crazy because like it only has rats in the encounter set for the enemies, and like obviously Brown Jenkins and Nahab. But then suddenly you're scaring down those rats with like 1,000,000 health and 1,000,000 like attack and evade, and you're like, what the fuck? Like, what happened? They used to just be rats, and then they're scary. It's really good. It's really elegant, too. And it doesn't feel like as a goon you have nothing to do. So I think it's a good success for that. On to the Wages of Sin. All right, so if I showed Undimensioned and Unseen the respect that it has a fun challenge to try to play for, same with Boundary Beyond, I do think I'm going to show the same respect to the Wages of Sin, to put it in annoying as opposed to the I don't like playing it where it's sat in the past. So I'm gonna offer the same respect there because I do enjoy I've kind of been looking at it a little bit more enjoyable to try my best to get more heretics. It has the issues that I don't like in Undimensioned and Unseen, which is the random chance. Sorry, we're an hour into the video and I need to like take a break and drink some water and refresh my brain because we're starting to get that working. Boundary Beyond way above these other two. Yeah, Boundary Beyond's actually sick. It's actually an enjoyable time to play. It's actually an enjoyable time. The Wages of Sin, I don't think so as much. Same with Undimensioned Unseen there. I don't actually look forward to playing them, so that's why I'm going to be putting them down here. But I think they're not bad scenarios. I think they're just tough scenarios that, like Wages of Sin especially, that is going to test your deck in a way that you're usually not prepared for because it has a lot of demanding things. I think the balance on the Heretics could have been better, like their stat lines and like their health and all that. But I think as a whole, I'm hard on it, but it is kind of fun when you're playing it to try and dream that you're going to do better. And I think that's like, it's very similar to Undimensioned and Unseen for that for me, where maybe this time I'll do better, and then I don't. And I'm like, well, at least I tried, right? At least I tried to do better, and that's something. Like, we got 2 of them, the cards fell in our favor. I think that honestly, I think if the random chance was less crazy random, or like the demanding standard, the demanding stipulation you need to hit for the backsides, it would be a much more well-liked scenario. With that said, it has my least favorite thing in the world. My least favorite thing in this game. I hate it more than anything. When the front side says parlay, spend a clue like parlay, look at the backside and do not resolve any of its text. And then that backside says, if you read this card, it attacks you. What the fuck? Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, that makes no sense, right? It's not how the English language works, but it works in Arkham somehow. And that's probably like one of my biggest pet peeves in Arkham. I'm curious, how would you write that for an effect like it's intended? I would just like not. I would just do something else. I've always been able to understand it, but it's just no. Like, I understand, like, that's the intention, right? Like, that's the intention of the card. Like, I understand the idea is that it hits you, but like, it doesn't actually make sense. Yeah, 1, because that's what it is. It's like, do not do 2. At 2, ignore step 1. It like actually causes a paradox of rules that I think they could have just said like resolve the text on the like resolve, like, or there could have been a section for it. Yeah, it's one of those things where the intention of the card explains the card completely. But it just annoys the hell out of me, man. Like, it doesn't actually make sense if you just like read the card with your brain and like your English language is like, wait a minute, this ain't right. Someone's fucking fucked here. And you just have to like let it happen. Yeah, that would be the way to do it. Like, yeah, it's like read parlay, read defeat. Yeah. But I understand the intention. I'm not like saying that it shouldn't work that way. It's that it should work that way, but it's not worded to work that way. For the greater good. I think this is a good scenario. If I don't read the card, does that mean the heretic don't attack me? It always attacks you. Even if you're just looking at it. It's like it's there. If it's there, it attacks you. You pick up the card, it attacks you. You engage the card, it attacks you. You smell the card, it attacks you. It's actually attacking you right now when you're just in this video, watching this video, it's attacking you. For the greater good, I think is a good scenario. Yeah, I like how it's like Phantom of Truth, where it changes depending on what path of the story you're following. Which I think is neat, and it also does that with very little rules baggage, just like Phantom of Truth. I'm a sucker for a scenario that changes how it hits, depending on like small changes between them. So it's like 2 versions, and each side is different, where you actually have to do elaborate setup changes and all that to get there. I think that's always really neat. Yeah, the keys are cool. I wish that, I've said this before, and I'll probably say it again, and I'll probably say it again and again, and again and again. I wish that the keys were in the core set. I think that's such a neat, simple thing that could have been explored in so many different scenarios in a variety of different ways. I like that they do it with tokens. I think that's kind of neat, but I do think that it would be more exciting and like the mechanic would be cooler to explore from a design standpoint if they were there from the beginning. So That's kind of like my one of my 3 wants for Arkham. If I could go back in time and change things, that would be one of them. However, with that said, though, I think that after repeated plays, For the Greater Good is kind of lost its luster. Also, why the fuck is it a mindless dancer on For the Greater Good? That's strange. They just didn't care, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I like when the beast, like, I do my best to try to avoid the beast showing up. I like talking to the lodge members. There's a lot of cool stuff, but I don't think, like, it's particularly spicy enough to, like, really push it into that one. And it also kind of feels like you're kind of just, like, it's not like Catacombs, right? Where, like this one, where, even though the gameplay loop is pretty similar, like small changes to the map can just change how the scenario is paced, or how you like kite enemies, or like different things like that. It doesn't really have that little thing that makes it feel particularly open with how you approach it, which is kind of like the issue. On to Union and Disillusion. Okay, I'm just gathering my thoughts. I think after many attempts and many runs through the Circle Undone, and after playing it and experiencing it in a large variety of ways, I think this is the worst scenario in the Circle Undone. Mostly because it's boring as hell. And it's very repetitive. It has that cool interlude in the middle where you go into the different locations and like you get to find out the fate of the people from the Twilight Estate and their disappearance. But is that enough for me to actually like it? I don't like the circle actions. They're honestly like, you auto fail at least one of them and it's brutal every time, which is good. It's good. But it's also like, it's not like a fun brutal, you know? Like there's like fun brutal where you auto-fail something, you're like, oh, fuck, that was bad. But you auto-fail the circle action and you're like, okay, let's add up the numbers again. Let's spend our clues. Let's commit cards, you know? I just think that it's a little bit, it's just like not good. So I'm going to put this one in the I don't like playing it at all. I'm not super big on this one. I'm not super big. Now, in the clutches of chaos. All right. I've been thinking about this one. This one might surprise even me when I'm talking about this today. But I used to always put this one in the I hate this one. I think it's bad. But I'm going to put it in annoying. I'm going to put it up a tier. Maybe this one I would want to. And I think a big thing for me for why this one is annoying is just one simple thing. And it's the random spawning of clues. If you took that out and clues spawned by like on the location with the most incursions, we got a banger. Like, we got a banger if there was just that one change, right? If that was the only change, I would be like, okay, this is a good scenario. It's good. I like that there's a lot of positives and a lot of negatives for me for In the Clutches of Chaos. The positive is that the negative is that it's very swingy. It can just random chance can get you there. Why does it matter? Not like you're running around the entire map every other turn anyway? Okay. I'll answer that question. I'll get sidetracked. Why does it matter? Okay. Number one. A big thing about the issue within Clutches of Chaos that is both a positive and a negative is that all the times that, like, the best way to play the best way to play in the Clutches of Chaos is to actually not play your deck, right? Like, you just, like, you have to, like, put it down one asset, and then everything else you're designed to deal with the incursions that show up, which is usually by committing cards from your hand, discarding cards with icons, discarding cards, milling your deck, doing a variety of things that basically just say, hey, you got to do this and not play with your cards. So then you put that on top of that, where you have to get random clues at random spots, which means that, like, you're running and gunning and grabbing the clues, which just kills a whole other aspect of your deck. You're basically just playing stat ball. And I think that's, like, again, both a positive and a negative, because I enjoy scenarios that change how you play Arkham, talking about Essex County Express, right? But it's one of those things where, like, if they were on the same location, it would give you that one aspect of control that makes it so that you can, like, advance the game state in such a way, right? So you put the clues, let's just say, like, you put the clues on a random location. It's on this random location over here, and you have a random location over here. Instead, you put the clues where there are the most incursions. So now you're like, okay, we go solve this objective, we grab a clue as our reward. It might not get 2 clues, right? Because you can't stack them up that way. Like, or maybe, like, if there was more punishment for you losing your breaches, because they already are put into place of putting your breaches down on the board. Because you don't want to lose them through encounter card effects or, like, negative things, right? It's just that one little thing that there is already so little control that you as the player have in this scenario. I think that giving just one aspect of control would make this a scenario that's actually, like, I think pretty alright to good. And that's why I'm proposing that if this clues didn't spawn randomly, but instead spawned at the location with the most breaches, I think that kind of flavorfully makes sense, right? Because that's where the things that you need to investigate are, because what is causing these breaches to open. And 2, it allows you to actually, like, build a plan that's not just like, okay, I have to go over here, but I can't go over here because there's this mess I need to clean up over here, right? It gives you a little bit more control, which, like, every other scenario gives you, like, some aspect of control, but I think in the Clutches of Chaos gives you very little control, which might have been what they were going for, but I think it's to the game's negative. Do you play it that way? Maybe off camera first? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to play the scenario as it is. That's just I'm not looking at changing the scenarios, right? I'm just looking at, like, hypothetically saying what I think would make the scenario better. I don't care. Like, I'll still play in the Clutches of Chaos. I still have a time with it, right? I still am like, okay, this ain't bad. I'm not even sure those clues need to exist at all in the scenario. That's another thing. I actually would be down for that too. If there were no clues, but instead, like, every time you remove, like, you can spend these breaches to put a clue on the Mythos, on the agenda deck, or the act deck, that would be another change that I think would be good. I think, honestly, they should, because then you could have embraced the chaos even more and be like, you ain't even doing a basic investigate this scenario, Rex Murphy. And I'm like, okay, now we're talking. But it's like, it's asking you to still play Arkham, but just with, like, random spawning clues and, like, random spawning threats, which is just a little bit too much random to make it actually an enjoyable experience. So yeah, I think it's annoying, and I think because of that reason. I will say, though, Bryn and I played it in the Events Only 2 challenge, and it might have been the first time it went well. So that's good, but it still wasn't fun. That's the thing, right? Like, I'm saying this to, like, make it more fun, not to make it easier, but just to, like, give you a bit more control so you can actually, like, have a bit more fun than just, like, sweeping up a mess that the game made. And the mess shows up randomly. There's just Azathoth pooping on the floor at random places. No early win in Events 2 challenge confirmed. Do you think Bryn would ever try to go for an early victory. No, Bryn goes for the long haul. Bryn never throws Lita Chandler at Udmordoth, which means that Bryn only goes for the one ultimate win. He never goes for the easy way out. That shouldn't be a surprise. Before the Black Throne, I'm less hot on this one than I was previously. It is very swingy, right? It is very swingy. And like a lot rides on basically just how you arrive and when you arrive on the locations you're supposed to. It has like I understand the intention, but it has another one of my least favorite things, which is Mythos cards on act flips. Like I understand why it's there, right? Because it's there because on the act flip, you reset the board. And it didn't want to kill the enemies on the act flip. So instead, it respawns them, right? However, with all that said, it is still a very scary challenge. I would normally have put it in like these two tiers, but I think I'm still going to put it in just a great scenario. It does a lot of cool stuff, but I'm less high on it than I was previously. Mostly just because, yeah, the swinginess of it, it's not really like fun to like get to that location and be like, we got the wrong one. We got the wrong one. We're probably going to lose. We got the wrong one. And it's so hard to like right yourself from that. So I think that's a little bit unfortunate. I like the challenge it provides. Like I enjoy it as like a very hard final scenario, but I'm not gonna. It doesn't really move the needle for me that much. Man, we gotta get moving. Last year at this time we were at Innsmouth at an hour and 10 minutes. We're at an hour and 26, and I just got to Dream Eaters. So maybe we're gonna speed through Dream Eaters because Dream Eaters is pretty basic. It's a very linear campaign. Beyond the Gates of Sleep, it's fine. Hey, Duomi! And also Mr. Biofan, thank you for the follows. I think it's a fine opening scenario.
Fatality.
Oh, Duomi, thank you so much for the Twitch Prime. Welcome to the Golden Table. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for using your Bezos bucks on me. I really appreciate it. So Beyond the Gates of Sleep, I think is a brilliant. So I think Dream Eater as a whole is a brilliant blind play, but I think that it really falls off after that when you've played it a few more times. So I'm going to put this one in fine. The opening path of like having to go down the steps is enjoyable the first time, and then after that, not so much. By the way, that's a hype train. Mr. Biofan, thank you for the Twitch Prime subscription. Welcome to the Golden Table as well. It's a pleasure to have you. Oh no. 3 mental and 1 physical trauma. Oh no. I mean, if you do need to retire, Sister Mary, go to Zoe Samaras if you have her, and then use the ancestral token in her. Because I think Zoe would be very well suited for that job as well. Just then you get the ancestral token and you'll do golden. But yeah, I think it's just a little bit too linear. The only real stress point for me is when the Gug shows up. Yeah. It's fine. It's fine. Waking Nightmare, though, honestly, I think this is an amazing scenario. I think it's one of my favorite opening scenarios. It's really fun. It's just I like the spiders. I like the rush to try to beat the infected areas or wherever they're called before they spread into the basement. Like, that's really enjoyable. It can be a little bit swingy depending on how the infestation tokens like run. Waking Nightmare is spiders, yeah. It's a very good opening scenario. The flavor's really nice. Yeah, I really like the scenario. I think it's a really good time, and I like the realization on the blind plays, which Eric might have had, where the second Randolph Carter shows up, and the whole wait a minute, something ain't right here, and then watching Eric put the pieces together to get there, I think is really cool. It's a really good scenario, and it also it doesn't have the same linearity problems that I think a lot of Dream Eaters has. Even though it is still quite a linear scenario, the infestation bag can really change the order in which things like fall and how things come into place and all that. Search for Kadath, I think, is another amazing scenario. The flavor is just insane. It has a really fun challenge of trying to get as many signs of the gods as you can as a metric to which to measure yourself. It's very linear, but not in a way that I think is bad, because there's one that's linear that I think is actually actively pretty annoying. But I think it's an amazing scenario. It's a great blind play. I never want it to end. It's actually one of the few that I still also enjoy reading the backsides of the cards because the worlds are so wondrous and fun. So, Search for Kadath are, they're cool, man. It's a cool scenario. Yeah. All right. 1,000 Shapes of Horror. I think I'm going to put this one in annoying. The Unnameable. Yeah, I mean, you guys should all know this by now. I've said this before. If this is your first video, welcome. I'll share this thought here. I hate scenarios with, like, unkillable enemies. I just don't enjoy that as a mechanic. It's not fun for me to just have something that, like, you know, you have to just, like, spend an action. So it's basically giving you not actually, but actually, like, a frozen inferior at a certain point, and you just kind of have to, like, live with it, or someone has to live with it, or you just, like, bring Finn to cheese it, but then Finn gets attacked by it because of the brain test, right? The brain test is scary, admittedly. I do like that aspect for it. But what really brings this one down is the first half is very plain, and it doesn't really have an interesting hook, I think. You're kind of just, like, moving from rooms of the house and being like, I opened the attic. Inside the attic, I found a key. In the key, we go to the graveyard. In the graveyard, there's a door. We use the key, right? And it's one of those things where the second half just sucks. I hate the stairs. The stairs are kind of just like, if I had to choose the steps or the ramp, I would probably choose to kill myself with a gun. That's not true. That's not true. I would use, like, a laser or something. I would do something cool, so if people found me, they'd be like, he roasted his head off with a laser? That's sick. But no, like, it's just like a linear path that you can just get absolutely screwed by encounter cards in a way that's just, like, I think not enjoyable. Unlike Essex County Express, which you actually have a lot of ways to play against it, because you can kind of just, like, try to get ahead of it. Where in this one, it's kind of just like, you try to get ahead of it, but then suddenly the encounter card says, sorry, you've lost 9 actions, you know? Yeah, I don't enjoy it. I don't think it's an enjoyable scenario. Dark Side of the Moon, shout out to Astute Dunsparce, who for somehow still always dies to Cats of Saturn, probably. I think this scenario is fine. It's just incredibly linear. It's just, like, very, very linear. Like, just, it's cool. The flavor's really fun. Like, I like the locations. And again, I think on the blind play, for me personally, this is higher. I like the Moon Lizard. I like the enemies. I think everything is, like, really nice, but it's just the linearity of it. It's so on the rails. You do one location, clear off that location. You move to another location, you clear off that location. You move to that location, you clear off that location. You move to that location, oh my god, there's a Moon Lizard. Just kidding, it's dead. Clear off that location, move to another location. It's just so linear in a way that I don't think is, like, a nice linear. Because the reality is that a lot of Arkham is quite linear, but it doesn't, like, lock you into the path you need to take, unless it's, like, there's a gimmick to go with it. And this scenario doesn't really have a gimmick. It has the alarm levels, but not enough to, like, actually make that an enjoyable thing to play with. Point of no return. I think this scenario is also just fine. Also quite linear. It's very similar to Dark Side of the Moon. It has the Ghoul Gang. It has cool things. It has, like, a similar mechanic. I like how both of them have a similar thing where in the third scenario of Dream Eaters on each half. They don't have an agenda that causes you to die by flipping, like it doesn't lose you the game, but it like hurts you more, and I like that. I think that's pretty neat. But overall, just they're so linear that they don't really do anything for me. That would you say the Dole is a bit underwhelming? I would say the Dole's a bit underwhelming. I think that's a fair statement on the Dole. Where the Gods Dwell? I mean, honestly, I'm going to do both this together. I think both of these are great final scenarios. I think they're really fun. Both Weaver of the Cosmos and Where the Gods Dwell. They certainly are the most video gamey final bosses that we've had in a campaign, but I think that that's pretty sweet. I think that like the spectacle of each of them are really cool, and they're personally my two favorites of the finales to play of what we've seen so far. Just because they're really fun, right? Like the mechanic of each of the ancient ones, each of the bosses, are neat as hell, right? Art on Weaver is a +2. Yeah, the Ashla Naka art is really good. So yeah, I'm big on both of those. They're very engaging. Like I said, they feel like video game bosses, which is really cool. I think they're huge wins for final scenarios. They both do a thing which I don't enjoy, but you can kind of see that this is the trend going forward, where the final scenarios are broken up into two parts, where you walk down a path and then spawn a second map where things actually get started. So that's a knock against them, even though they both do it, which is kind of cool. But as soon as now, like, every finale kind of starts doing that, it becomes a little bit less engaging. I think if you want to have a climactic finish, make it its own scenario. That's my opinion. Okay, let's jump into the standalones, which I'm going to do pretty quickly. I don't really enjoy standalones too much, so we're going to just kind of like... The Arkham second, Ashla Naka art, though? Is that the one when she's like this? No, that's the one when it's like this. That's the Arkham second. This one's Dream Eaters. The Dream Eaters, sorry, not the Dream Eaters. The Eldritch Horror one's really good. But the second one when she's like, yeah, that one's something. All right. Curse of Uruguru, it's fine. It's a fine scenario. It has a neat gimmick. It's hard and standalone. It's fine. I don't really enjoy playing it, but I don't think it's annoying. It could be annoying, actually, because of the way the Uruguru moves around, but it gives you a lot of control still when he does move and he drops the clues. I like how it's difficult, though, but I'm going to give this one just a fine. On our way to the Carnival of Horrors, I think this is it's probably my most played standalone. I think I'm going to put it into great. I think it's a great scenario. I really enjoy playing it. It's probably, like I said, my most played standalone. It's probably the only standalone that I actually, I think actively enjoy playing. I love the map. I love the rowboat section. I love all the little things that hint towards the final boss showing up. So, yeah. I'm going to give this one a great. I think it's a good one. Labyrinths of Lunacy. Honestly... I think it's just kind of annoying. It's not a good scenario. It's fun in massive multiplayer, but not as fun as the other ones. So that kind of really knocks it down. I don't really want to play it again for massive multiplayer, which by the way, we're streaming tomorrow, a massive multiplayer in the morning, so you should come watch that. I don't think it's a great scenario for sure. I don't think it's great. The Eternal Slumber and the Night's Usurper. So I think the Eternal Slumber is a great scenario. I think this is a really fun, challenging scenario that has some nice twists to it that I think is really cool. I love the threat of Neith when she shows up. I like trying to we played this one recently. Recently, I mean probably a year and a half ago at this point. It's a very fun scenario. I like how difficult it is. I like how the enemies really test your mettle. I think it's a really cool scenario. However, I think the Knight's Usurper part is just kind of fine. I don't think it's as good as the Eternal Slumber. I think it's like a little bit boring. I think it's once again split into multiple maps, which I don't really enjoy. So I'm going to put that one down into fine. I don't think it's bad, but I don't think it's like a really enjoyable scenario. Murder at Excelsior Hotel, I think it's a good scenario. I don't think it's great. I would like it a lot more if the last part of the scenario wasn't just 2 rounds. Because I feel like that's the problem I have with Murder at Excelsior Hotel, is that it's really fun the first time. The blind playthrough of it is really good. But then you're like, it could be anything, right? Like, oh my God, like we can have any sort of result as we get into the second half of this scenario. It's going to be not just the manager in the lobby, it's going to be the aliens on the roof. That's so exciting. And then you play it again, and you're like, oh wait, no, it's actually just like 12 rounds of talking to cops and then 2 rounds of the parts that's different. If the part that was different, like if the talking to cops was like 8 rounds and then like the, if it was like 6 rounds and then like 6 rounds of the second half, I think I would agree with the general sentiment that this scenario is very, very good, or like even goated. But that's my big problem with it, is that it is actually less replayable than it seems on the tin, and I do wish there was more time in the second half. Okay, on to Innsmouth. 30 minutes later than last year's list video. Last year's ranking video. That's okay. That's okay. The Pit of Despair. I think this scenario is amazing, man. I think this is a great scenario. I think it's like amazing scenario. I say great, but you know, it's an amazing opening scenario. It's probably my favorite opening scenario. I love the way the map spreads. I love the way it. Let's try to outpace last year's videos. Yeah, I'm behind on my splits right now. I'm trying to speed run it, but my splits are failing. I like the amalgam. Even though I don't like killable enemies, you actually practically do kill it when it when you do. It's just shows up again, as opposed to like the whole like when you deal health, evade it, exhausted, it doesn't ready this turn. It's a big difference in that sort of thing. But I think what I really like about it is just that like the deep ones are hard, man. I mean, they're not hard; they're easy to kill, but like they don't mess around. They're just like, hey, I'm here to deal you some horror or some damage. Or you're going to discard a card from your hand. You kind of need to have a plan for the deep one bull. And these are all things that I think make like a really good experience for a scenario where like the enemies actually start to add up after a while. I like the treacheries too. I think that there is... there's a lot that can really make it a really fun experience. I think it's my personal favorite opening scenario. We love the Pit of Despair. The Vanishing of Eleanor Harper, I think it's fine. So I think my big issue with the Vanishing of Eleanor Harper, honestly, if you gave the suspects victory 1 instead of victory 0, or like instead of like victory 0, it was like at the end of each suspect with no clues gives you victory 1, right? We'd be great. But the problem is that like there's cards that you don't want to hit in the deck of cards, right? Like in the clue deck or whatever it is, the Cluedo deck. There are cards that you don't want to hit, and that's bad, right? They should just give you victory. Like for each suspect, just give them the victory 1 if they have no clues on them, right? So like that's kind of the issue that this one kind of has, is that you want to solve the mystery, but you only want to hit certain cards to solve the mystery. So like that's kind of the big issue that the Vanishing of Eleanor Harper has. I do like when it's Othera Gilman, though. That's always a good time. In Too Deep. This scenario is one of the best. It's so good, man. It's literally, I think, the strongest scenario Arkham has to offer. It's just so good. It's paced incredibly well. It's terrifying. And it's hard. And like it's one of those things where suddenly it's my favorite thing where it can go badly in an instant. Like you could be like having a good time and things like, I think we got this, and then suddenly someone's dragged back into the murder ball and you're like, oh no. Oh no. Like Daisy's in the murder ball. What the fuck do we do? It's like, I guess we move in back to the murder ball to try to save her. And I think that's like one of those things. It's not my personal favorite scenario. But it is, I think it's just like a huge success in terms of scenario design. It's very good. It has an amazing hook. It has a map that's daunting at first, but then is actually like very easy to play with. The barricade mechanic's really neat. It's just a win from top to bottom, I think. Devil Reef. I think this one is also just fine. So I think that's kind of like a little bit of Innsmouth as well, is that like it's so like flip-floppy, you know? It kind of just like flip-flops from it flip-flops from like really great to fine, really great to fine. Like it's like a little bit like all over the place. It also has the XP split thing, which is a little bit annoying. Again, I'm happy that the designers try things, but I think I'm also happy to say when that doesn't really fit, right? Like it doesn't really work to the... It was a good attempt, but I don't think it actually like really fit too well. It didn't really work. Especially because like you get like assets that you've been playing with multiple times. You just like, you remember, oh yeah, I had this red clock the entire time. Luckily, it is very easy to ignore. And I agree, you don't lose too much, but it still feels, I've only done it once, and that's when I played the Return to, because you, as the creator of it, said, hey, you should just ignore it. That's what I do. But when I play official stuff, it feels wrong for me to make content when I do ignore it, because people at home won't. So it's one of those things. But overall, Devil Reef, it's not like the moving around the map is cool to like use your boat to get through all the tunnels, find the islands as things like flip to reveal and all that. Like that stuff's neat, but not enough to really like go the distance to make it a super enjoyable one. Where did I find the Return to? Well, DareBK can link it in chat. I think you're allowed to do a link. Feel free to link it if you want. Horror in High Gear. Eh, you know what? I'm going to call this a good scenario. It's grown on me, man. Horror in High Gear has grown on me mostly because, apart from the awful blind play, I think that Horror in High Gear actually has, unless you're playing with someone who has already played it, it has a very tough blind play because the rules are a little bit chunky. However, when you get past that and you've played it a few times, it's one of those things where like it becomes very fun and has a lot of good moments in it, and like a lot of good memories, like Wendy Adams driving the car by herself, you know, or like Will York in his death car being like, oh God, I hope I don't die here, which is where I really enjoy it. It paints a lot of good like a lot of good a lot of good moments. Yeah. Okay. A Light in the Fog. So I'm not going to put this one on one of the best. Even though it is probably my second favorite scenario, I take away my own opinions for these videos sometimes as well. I try to get my bias out of it. And I think so Light in the Fog is an amazing scenario. The thing that keeps it out for me from one of the best is that sometimes the whole pumping part of it can be a little bit more tedious than it is fun, which flavorfully makes sense. You know, you just keep pumping the water and you're like, we filled up that room, but now this room's empty. So that's like my only big knock against it. But it is an incredible scenario with a lot of great stuff going on about it. What makes Light in the Fog stand out for you amongst all the title tunnel grid scenarios? The story it tells. So like that's the big thing for me. The thing that I like most in Arkham is when a story emerges during the gameplay. And there is so much story packed in A Light in the Fog in small little things, right? There is the babies that show up, and you have to either, like, you know, when they engage, you have to make the choices. But when you kill a baby, the mothers get mad. The mothers make everything stronger when they're around, right? There is the jail cell, which is a cool little thing when you're suddenly captured and you're locked in the jail cell and you lose your keys. There is just the simple things, just that is like the mechanic of peeking down the tunnels to see what's on your level. Just small things like that are all telling a story. And then, of course, there's Osiris. And when that motherfucker locks you in the basement, like, you're like, okay, this is do or die. Like, this is where things get real. So the stakes are also much higher than all the other grid scenarios, when the stakes are the stakes, not the snakes. Snakes Forgotten Age are much, much lower. Okay. Lair of Dagon? Honestly, I just think this is a bad scenario. I don't think this one does it. I just don't think this one does it for me. Like, the mechanic of this one is... the mechanic of this one is just curse tokens. And, like, that's not a great mechanic. There's just like, and there's nothing that interesting that even actually happens. It's very similar to Where Doom Awaits, where I think the penultimate scenario kind of just like sucks. And I think there was a lot of cool things you could have done with the Esoteric Order of Dagon, which was one of my favorite locations in Innsmouth in Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. So I feel like double let down because of that. And I also don't really enjoy the bit at the end with Dagon. I don't think it's that interesting. So yeah. So I'm not really like super high on this one. I just think it's like it's a bad scenario. Okay, next up we got Into the Maelstrom, which is the first of the scenarios that really goes in on a trend that unfortunately I think sticks around for a few expansions, which is that it's a multi-map scenario, and also the trend where the finales aren't that great for a little bit. I'm going to put Into the Maelstrom in fine. It's not a bad experience, but it is... it is a rough experience. Like, it's a boring experience, and, like, there's nothing... It's easy, right? Like, that's the other thing, you know? It's one of those things where it's just... I think that Into the Maelstrom is kind of just like the first snoozy finale, which was especially disappointing after both Weaver of the Cosmos and Where the Gods Dwell, where like it was actually kind of a cool thing. I think there was a lot of stuff that could have been explored with both Mother Hydra and Father Dagon that unfortunately I think just didn't really didn't really get there. So Into the Maelstrom, I think, is just fine. It's the first final scenario that I didn't at least enjoy, as you can tell from all this. Oh, except Shattered Aeons. Well, Shattered Aeons is an annoying. I already forgot about it. I also just called it Shittered Aeons. So, I guess you know how I think about that. Yeah, but the auto turret is really sick. We gotta love shooting Dagon with his own turret. Okay, on to the Edge of the Earth. Which is really relevant because I'm playing this with Quick Learner right now. So I have all that. Ice and Death Part 1? It's a good scenario. I think it's a good opening scenario. It's not one of the best. But it's on par with, I think, some of these other ones, too. It has some fun little, like, a fun little micro challenge, which is just, beyond just trying to find the best shelter to end on, it's how many times how many locations can I reveal so I can make the future stuff better, right? So there's that kind of thing. It does reuse the same map, which we're going to get accustomed with Ice and Death 1, 2, and 3. But unlike our good friend Heart of the Elders down here, each scenario is mechanically different enough that I honestly actually don't pay too much attention to the map. Which I guess is a positive and a negative, right? Where if the map doesn't really, didn't really, like, do too much, then is the map actually, like, worth it, is kind of one of those things. But I think it does a good job of introducing yourself to the barren wastelands, and I'm higher on Edge of the Earth than the general sentiment I've read about seems to be. I don't think it's awful. I don't think it's great. But I think Ice and Death is good. There's going to be a lot of good here, I think, in this one. Ice and Death Part 2, I still really like this scenario. I'm going to put it in great. I think it's a great scenario. I love the flavor. I love the story it tells. I love trudging around to try to find the person. I do like that sometimes if the wrong person wanders off, I really want to make sure that I save that person. I like that the emotional stake it gives me to the player to get there. I'm not going to talk about, this is not the campaign, which I have issues with, that we're not going to talk about this. This is just the individual scenarios, not caring about all the stuff that comes with them, and that is going to translate directly into the Scarlet Keys as well. I don't want to spend time talking about the Scarlet Keys campaign, because that's not relevant. We're going to talk a bit about Hemlock Vale, because it's Hemlock Vale's first time in this in these tier lists. But Scarlet Keys, we're not going to touch on the campaign too much. I agree that if there were different versions of the locations, Ice and Death would get a huge improvement. And this is actually something that, like, I hope we see more of in these new box formats, because I think the replayability, it's one of those things, they're sacrificing scenario replayability for this idea of campaign replayability. And I don't know if that is the right thing to do, because if the campaign is more replayable because the order in which you do things changes, is it actually replayable, or are you just doing things a little bit differently if your scenarios stay so static? Is there actually replayability is the question to be seen. I don't know about this for Hemlock Vale because we've only played the blind play of it so far, but that's not ironic. I'm Canadian. Anytime we say that's ironic, we're using the Alanis Morissette definition of ironic. I understand you don't know that because you're probably not Canadian, but that is when anytime I'm Canadian, anytime we say ironic, we're using the Alanis Morissette version of it. So it's like one of those things where it's actually, like, I think less replayable because of that. And if instead they put in some different locations, it would have been more replayable. All right. Ice and Death Part 3. I used to hate this scenario. I don't like enemies that keep coming at you. They were never my big thing. However, I've actually been enjoying Ice and Death Part 3 the more and more that I've played it. So it's I think it's a good scenario. I think that Ice and Death as a whole is an enjoyable experience, part 1, 2, and 3. It's the Ice Milk coming at you. The Ice Milk coming at you is fun. I like trying to like track down and kill the Ice Milk before more sources come. It's a fun little challenge that goes with it. Again, this goes back to that mini game that you had in Ice and Death Part 1 and Part 2, where your micro objective was to reveal more locations to make future ones easier. This scenario turned a new leaf after that turn 1 fin kill. That certainly helped, but I think a big thing was that I think that Ice and Death Part 3 is going to be one of those scenarios that becomes better after the blind play. It's like, I think that Ice and Death Part 3 is... I didn't enjoy the blind play, but like when you know what to expect, it becomes a fun challenge to go deeper into things. So that's why I'm starting to enjoy Ice and Death Part 3 a little bit more. To the Forbidden Peaks. I think this is a great scenario. I don't think it's amazing, but I do think it's great. It has everything I want in an Arkham scenario, right? It has a cool flavor. It has challenges that are tied to that flavor very well. And it has random replayability that makes future runs of the scenario very enjoyable, right? Which is super awesome, which I think is a very fun time. I've never had a bad time playing to the Forbidden Peaks. It's just a really enjoyable time, and it's a good challenge. I like trying to bring things up the mountain. I love getting to the top and being like, hey, do we have the time to get this victory? I like the mini-boss that shows up halfway through and kills Cookie, hopefully. There's a lot of good things about To the Forbidden Peaks, and I think it's a really good scenario. City of the Elder Things, however, has not held up as much for me. I think it's still a good scenario. I used to have it in Great, I believe anyways, but I do still think that it is still a good time, but I am a little bit less high on it than I was previously. A big reason for that is just because, like, I don't think there's, like, I mean, like, it's cool that there's all the keys on stuff, but that's not a big enough hook for me to enjoy playing the scenario. I like the little mini objectives it brings where it's like, how can I spend the other keys in a most efficient way? It's one of those things that, like, I think that there's different setups for it that, I mean, honestly, I don't think I've changed it too much for me. I've played them all now, and I can't really notice anything that was too different between them. Small changes, which I think is really cool. I like the different map layouts, but I think it's a good scenario. It might be great after a few more plays, but I'm not as high as I expect it to be. Fatal Mirage is fine. It's a neat scenario. But I think, okay, here's the problem with Fatal Mirage, right? Because you have the potential to play it 3 times, but you probably don't, is a sign that, like, probably the scenario is not great, right? If it was a good scenario and worth it, you'd have more reason to. But, like, even just, like, playing it twice, you're like, I'm okay. Thanks, though. I'm okay. Thank you. So I think that's kind of the issue. I'm going to put it in the fine. I don't think it's annoying. I actually, like... Yeah. I'm pretty happy with that placement. Crispy, 19 months at the golden table. Thank you for your Prime, and, you know, thank you for the Bezos bucks. I hope you're doing good, and thank you for supporting the channel. The Heart of Madness Part 1. I think it's good. I don't think it's great, but I think it's a good scenario. I like the setup of it. It's a good build to the final thing. It has some great text on the agenda where you have to, like, not put 2 active ones together or the world explodes. I think that's pretty poggy. I love stuff like that, which I think is really cool. It will be fun. I'm looking forward to it too. Yeah, but I think like there's nothing like I think bad about it. It's a good setup into the final scenario, which in the Heart of Madness Part 2, I think is annoying. I do not like the scenario. Again, we're seeing that trend of the final scenarios that are split into different parts for reasons. Can you define poggy? Yeah, it's when you pog out of your gourd. But the problem with it is it's like two scenarios mixed together. It has an unkillable enemy that you need to spend actions to deal with. So you're basically frozen and fearing yourself just to play the game. I like the idea behind it, but I don't know if it really works mechanically in a way that is fun and enjoyable to play. And then it happens, it has the ramp, which I don't like. I don't like the ramp part of the game. Especially when you Especially when you do everything and then you still have to climb up the ramp. And I hate that part. Why is my reward for completing the objective just less goo? When I did it, and it's not easy to do. Like, why? The ramp part sucks. The ramp should be the punishment for not doing the ultimate ending, or to not doing like all the objectives. That should be the punishment. I shouldn't have to do the part that sucks just because I did it all. Like, we shouldn't have to climb the ramp. The ramp sucks. I hate the ramp. The ramp's poopy. Okay. Alright, we're going much faster. I guess I had a lot to say about Dunwich. I talked a lot about Dunwich this year. Alright, Standalone's Part 2. That's funny. This dude does part sometimes just want to put 2 energized keys in the same location instead of doing Part 2. That's pretty funny. Alright. I realize I'm late to the party, but I need to move Undimensioned, Unseen 1 tier down. Nah, man, you're just bad at Arkham. So that's the thing I missed. I was saying, like, if you don't like if you think Undimensioned and Unseen sucks, got bad news for you. That means you suck. It's a fun challenge. Try to challenge yourself, and you'll do better. Meddling Meowthotep is a fine scenario. Once again, we're just gonna be we're just going to fire through these ones because I think that, once again, standalones don't really move the needle too much without me. For me, so I'm not going to do this one. Honestly, if you're looking at getting the Barkham Horror, just don't. It's not worth it. Just proxy it. Proxy the investigators. It's okay. The scenario is cute, but like, you don't need to really do too much. So it's kind of just like fine. The Blob that did everything, I think... I don't have War of the Outer Gods out here. I need to add War of the Outer Gods. I probably said that exact thing last year. I think the Blob that did anything is a great scenario. I think it's a great standalone. It's probably a really fun time to... it's a really fun epic multiplayer. It's just a really good scenario. I think that... I think that it's just like a really enjoyable time. The reality acid's really enjoyable to see what gets eaten. The blob mechanic of him exposing his heart is really cool. Mechanically, it's just very tight and very good. Machination through time, I think it's good. I don't think it's great. It's probably my third... if I would do War of the Outer Gods, I think War of the Outer Gods is also great. So I'm going to be doing... Machinations Time is probably the third favorite. I think it's still a good scenario. I do like how it's paced in terms of the... excuse me. The past, present, and future. If you're playing epic multiplayer, it's loaded, so the past has to do all their stuff first, so they're busiest in the mid-game. Sorry, in the early game. The present is busiest in the mid-game, and the future is earliest in the late game. I think it's a really cool design because of that. So, I really think that's neat. I don't think it's a great scenario, but I do think it is good. Okay. On to the Scarlet Keys. Which, again, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the campaign as a whole, because I feel like that's been done enough on this channel and on the internet in and of itself. Riddles and Rain. That's the opening scenario. I have to remind myself, there's going to be a lot of talking about what the scenario was. So Riddles and Rain, I think it's a good opening scenario. It's very linear. And it does a good job, I think, of introducing mechanics that you're going to see throughout the whole campaign. So I think there's some positives to it there. But I think, like, the issue is that there's, like, no big hook to me that really makes me, like, want to play it again and again. Like, even, like, the other level zero, sorry, the other first scenarios in this, they're already, I think, more engaging than Riddles and Rain is. I think Riddles and Rain is, I think the issue with Riddles and Rain is that it's just a little bit too linear. And then it builds to this climax with the Red Glove Man, which I don't think hits to the levels that they intended. It's kind of just fine. And then, of course, it means that you have to play Scarlet Keys. So that's what's coming up after this. Dancing Mad. This is the Desi one, right? Yes. It's good. It's a good scenario. It has a really cool thing that was like the two versions of him, which I think is a really nice thing. I know you can get like the secret to I know you can get like his secret to be able to know which one is the real one, but I think it's more fun to just kill one of them. You just kill one of them and then you're like, all right, hopefully you're the right one, and we'll see once we get to the final scenario, but I think that's like a really cool thing. And I think that was a great design choice from the storytelling perspective. So, yeah. That's why I'm like kind of think it's fine. I think it's a good scenario. Dead Heat. I think Dead Heat's probably my favorite scenario in Scarlet Keys. So I'm going to give it a great. I don't think it's amazing. I think realistically, of all the scenarios I've played in Scarlet Keys, none of them are amazing. I don't understand. I mean, actually, I do understand, because they had to test like 2 to 3 versions of each scenario. So, like, none of the scenarios, I think, really do anything interesting. And I think that's kind of my biggest problem with Scarlet Keys as a whole. I don't care about the reading, because after my blind play, I don't fucking read that shit anymore. It's that you have to make a decision, and your decision is so open, and then, like, none of the scenarios are really interesting enough for me to decide to play. And I think that's kind of my big issue, is that the gameplay of the scenarios themselves aren't as enjoyable as some of the campaigns that came previously. With that said, though, I do enjoy Dead Heat quite a bit. I love Amaranth. She's probably my favorite, apart from the man with the spectacles. I think he's pretty sick. I wanted to like the Beast in the Crimson Cowl, but unfortunately he's a little bit of a fucking wimp. So that's a little bit of a bummer. But I also care about Dead Heat and saving the people. So if you can make me mechanically care about something in the scenario, then that's a good sign. Dealings in the Dark. This is the Esche one, right? In Istanbul? I think the scenario's fine. I mean, maybe it's good. don't know. I'm going to give it to fine because I just like, even though there is some neat stuff where it's basically like a different version of Echoes of the Past, a different version of Echoes of the Past is not really too much of a thing. I don't get it. I don't get it why they tell you to move your one map aside and then like put the other map here, and then when you're done, move that other map back in. There are some things that I think like there's like I don't understand how that made it through. So that Luke can't go there. I mean, you could even just put somewhere, just you cannot leave, you cannot enter like this location, right? But I mean, like, that's the thing. Like, they could do it without, like, making your table suck for the 500 times you're playing that scenario without Luke, right? Like, just make it so it's like you cannot enter blank locations. Just put it on the act card or the agenda, right? That solves it as well. Or even just say on the thing, until you said otherwise, investigators cannot enter that location. Luke can still technically interact with them. That's okay, right? That's okay. It's one of those things like, does that really matter that Luke can use the location to grab some clues off of that location that probably has no clues on it anyway? Right? Like, it's these like fringe edge cases that's like are just are like, who cares? Like, it seems just like a weird choice that I actually probably personally think wasn't even because of Luke. It was because of just they were like, let's move it. We're in here now. The market is tight. We're going to be in the market as opposed to this. I think it's a weird choice. And then you get to the second part, Pat, and you do the second part, and you do the chase. That part's neat, but I think overall, I think we're just going to call this one a fine. Dogs of War. This scenario is annoying. Sorry. We're hitting the 2:15 mark, so. Apart from my blind play, I leave locations as they are. Me too. I do the same, but we're still allowed to complain about it because I think it is a weird choice that they have you remove them. I've only played one. I've only played this one once, but I don't think I actually ever want to play it again. So I think I have to one time just so I can get some perspective. But I have no fond memories of this scenario, except for the fact that Bryn made a frickin' mockery of the coterie member that I was the most excited to see. So, what the fuck? Why was he so easy to deal with? You know? Keimani was just in there being like, I'm the best, you're the worst. I don't know, yeah. So, like, that was a big bummer for me. But mechanically as well, like, all I remember about that scenario was that I'm pretty sure it had a mechanic where Doom did not count towards or, like, subtracted. So, like, it had that kind of thing going for it. But already I think that's done in other scenarios so much better, so even that hook's kind of not great. You have to protect, like, the bull statues. I remember that. Scenario kind of just is a little bit stinky. I don't think it's good. And, like, maybe it's better in one of the other versions, but at the same time, I don't know. That means I have to come back there in a future time to do it. I only want to play Scarlet Keys right now so I can, like, unlock the hidden ending. On Thin Ice? Yeah, it's a good scenario. On Thin Ice takes place in Alaska. I agree with Travis's sentiment that it becomes a little bit too easy to game the final part of the scenario by not having to actually interact and find the right version of the Chimera or whatever it is. But I mean, like, there's a lot of good there. I like the grizzly bear. I like the locale. I want them to do an Ithaqua actually like in the Pacific Northwest campaign. Like that would be really cool. I want to see that. I would love to play something like that, mostly because I'm close to the Pacific Northwest, so it resonates a lot with me. Yeah, it's a cool scenario. I wish Thorn was a little bit more involved. I mean, I guess not. Thorn is involved well in the story. I wish that I felt like I wanted to ever follow a different path, but I feel like it's kind of set. There's like one path you want to do in that one. But that's nitpicking a bit. I think the gameplay itself is actually pretty good for this one. Sanguine Shadows. I think this scenario is fine. I'm not as high as other people are on it, mostly just because I think it was a huge design oversight to only have an unlock on the second half if you have done everything perfectly, which I think is good because, you know, like you have, I like that like you have to earn the second half, but I would rather it be more that you have to, what you earn in the second half, determines how much of an advantage you have in the second half, right? So it's less about earning the part of the scenario that's not the same thing 3 times, but rather it becomes of how much power and how much advantage I have going into the second half of the scenario. And I think that's my big problem, because I think that it's enjoyable the first time, but then you're like, oh, I have to do this 2 more times. So it becomes less of an exciting thing, and that's why it's just fine for me. Shades of Suffering. I think it's annoying. I was able to win it, which felt great, in my Gauntlet run, which was pretty impressive. But that's the power of Rex Murphy, baby, I guess. But in and of itself, it kind of just has like the same issues that Wages of Sin does. It's very similar. I don't like the random spawning, the random stuff that you need to interact with. You have some ways that you can look at it, but it's still just like... I wish you didn't have to kill things like twice. Or stuff like that, like if you're wrong and it can go wrong. I don't know. It's just a little bit of an annoying scenario. I enjoy the challenge that the Umbrella adds, but I don't think I would ever play this one late in the campaign. I'd only play this one earlier if possible. Without a Trace, I don't want to talk about it. I haven't played it yet. I haven't found it. I mean, I've only played it like 3 times, but still, I don't want to talk about it. I still have not found it, and I'm trying to stay spoiler free, and maybe one day I will, but right now I haven't. Congress of the Keys. I think this scenario is actively bad. Again, I haven't played it without the Without a Trace change to it. But I think this is like the only final scenario that I would say is actively a bad scenario. If they split up the final scenario into the coterie section and then the outsider section, now we're talking. But the problem is now you get this giant scenario that's just a little bit too long, that's just a little bit too mechanically dense, and ultimately is not worth it. This is going to be a little bit different. Like, I think like some of them, like with the multiple setups, are a little bit more worth it, which is like the Weaver of the Cosmos and Where the Gods Dwell. But this one, not so much. It's the reason that I actually don't like playing the Scarlet Keys is because I know, well, number one, I have to choose my own path, which I don't enjoy doing, and number two, I have to deal with this scenario when it comes to the end, and I do not like that. I do not like that. All right, we have a few more standalones, and by that I mean literally just Fortune and Folly. Part 1 and Part 2. Honestly, I'll put Part 1 in the fine. And I'm going to put Part 2 in the good, because, like, that's where the scenario actually is. I don't think they're great. I think they're just a bit too... There's a bit too much going on for them to me to really, like, enjoy them. And again, I'm not, like, super high on standalones anyway. But I still think it's a good scenario. I think it's even very good, but I don't think it's great. I like the gambling part of it, but I don't like that you, like, kind of have to play Part 1 to make Part 2 enjoyable. Yeah. Okay. Should we start talking about what everyone actually asked? Like, are you going to be doing this? Should we get to Hemlock Vale? I think I'm going to talk about this for a half hour. Do you think this is going to be a 3-hour long video? Oh, okay. Oh, what the fuck? War of the Outer Gods is here. It's not on my tier list, though. All right, there we go. Hemlock Preludes. All right, I need to add War of the Outer Gods. I'm probably going to forget, and we're going to do it next year. We're going to have this exact same conversation next year. I think War of the Outer Gods is great, by the way. All right. Hemlock Vale. My cat's scratching at the door. Okay. I will say, just at the start of this, I am very high on Hemlock Vale. It is my second favorite campaign I've played. So much so that it has turned me, I'll say it, a little bit ignorant. Where if anyone says they don't like it, I automatically am like, this person doesn't know anything. So if you are one of those people who don't like Hemlock Vale, I'm happy for you. You know, we each have our own opinions, but there's no sense in trying to convince me otherwise, because I'm just going to think you're a crazy person talking to a wall. So my advice to you is, if you don't enjoy Hemlock Vale and you don't want to hear someone talk positively about it for the next 30 minutes, to just leave as well, because I'm just talking to a wall too. So I'm gonna return the favor. Just one of those things. Do a little opinion for without spoilers. It's my second favorite campaign. It's amazing. It's awesome. I love it. I think it's incredible. All right. Hemlock Preludes. So here's the thing about the Hemlock Preludes. If you look at them as an interactive way to build your starting hand, that is awesome. And they're really fun for that. It's basically like the puzzle becomes less like how, for me personally, it's not how can I talk to everyone in town, which is a neat puzzle in and of itself. It's instead, how can I build my best hand for the next scenario? And that's really exciting. I think in like themselves though, is that they're not like particularly great. I think they're good. I think they're fun. How are they going to hold up on reruns? I don't know. And this is like all of the preludes put together. So there is that to it. And then also, like, I will pass as well. My friends got upset when we couldn't talk to everyone, and I was like, isn't it more interesting if we don't, though? You know what? You're 100% right. It is more interesting if you don't. It is. I can't speak for Travis and Bryn, but we are immediately doing a rerun of Hemlock. Like, we're literally starting it next Wednesday. We played some Spirit Island for a few weeks, and now we're going immediately back to Hemlock, which is a good sign. Because we said, hey, we actually kind of want to play it again, as opposed to like Edge of the Earth and Scarlet Keys, when we were like, we'll get to this eventually, but these ones we dove right back in. I can understand that people who don't like the preludes, I like them though. I think you just have to change your perspective, where you treat it as, how can I build my mulligan to be the best mulligan it can be? Because you basically get to like choose what you want to play with for 3 scenarios of the campaign. And then honestly, if you're worried about like the rule issues that come up, just think less. That's my advice to you. Just think about it less. Just do what feels right to you. Who cares? Just like make a decision on your own. You're probably a 20-plus-year-old adult. I believe in you. We can do it. Written in Rock. The minecart scenario, when you get to be like DK Donkey Kong. DK Donkey Kong. Russ, my cat's scratching at the door. I'll be there soon, Russell. Calm down. This scenario actually has a very similar thing to A Light in the Fog, where it has the setup of a straight line into a grid-based map that you interact with. The minecart section, when we were setting it up, I was like, oh god, this is going to be a nightmare. But it actually plays relatively simple. I actually was like, okay, this all works. This all works. I get it. It's actually very easy to grok once everything is set up and you look past it all. I love like rotating and sliding puzzles, so it worked very well for my mind. I was able to put it together really, really going for it. I think my issue with Written in Rock is that you kind of, like, it could be wrong. This is all coming from my blind play as well, by the way. It's that you don't really have time to do anything, and you're kind of just like, you're along for the ride. It's like horror in high gear in a way, but like you have somehow even less time on locations to get things done. Again, this is coming from just my blind play, so I could be completely wrong with that. But that is my vibe for Written in the Rock right now. It's fun and enjoyable. I like the minecart aspect of it. But it doesn't have, it feels like you might be a little bit, pardon the pun here, on the rails, right? Like you're kind of like, it's not linear because you can like go around the map as you want, but you don't really get to decide where you are when you are. You're kind of just like going. I'm going to call it a good scenario though. I think it's a good scenario. Hemlock House, I have not played. Silent Heath, have not played. So notably, this is going to be a great time to talk about where we're going to talk about the how the campaign is structured in comparison to Scarlet Keys. And I have to say, I love how Hemlock Vale is structured in comparison to Scarlet Keys. Because with Scarlet Keys, you could do anything. You can go any path. And you essentially can kind of do the same thing in Feast of Hemlock Vale. Like you could go, like in Scarlet Keys, you could go right to On Thin Ice, right? You could go right to On the Lost Sister in Hemlock Vale. However, you don't need to keep track of everything in between, right? You can just decide, hey, I want to play this scenario. Oh, I want to play this scenario. I want to play this scenario. But then they also have like structures made out for you that like there's some interlude, there's some chosen scenarios that you can, if you don't want to decide, you can just do this, right? I think it's a very good structure. Lost Sister. Okay. I'm gonna preface this one here by saying that there is going to be some hype in this. It was my blind play. I enjoyed it. I had a really fun time. Are these going to be where they are when I look back at the campaign in a year? We're going to find out. The Lost Sister for me was an amazing scenario. And the reason for that is that it gave me a reaction to a blind play that I had not had happen since The Last King. And that was the moment when the big crab showed up and we got to look at the backside of his card. And then I was like, oh shit. This guy's terrifying. And then it went a step further, where we looked at that guy's card, and he was terrifying. And then I was like, what the fuck? And when we looked at the day side of the card, and it had the text, when this guy flipped to this guy, dealing like player damage or something like that, right? And then Bryn said, what if we drag him out of the cave? With an ability on the act card that up until this moment, we had no idea why we would ever want to use it. And then it was like, oh, I get it, because this one plays with the day-night mechanic differently than the previous, well, not the previous scenarios, it was our first one. So you want to drag the enemies into the right location because, you know, maybe like this crab's stronger at the day locations or weaker at the night locations. So you can kind of choose whichever one was best for the moment. And that told such a story in just gameplay mechanics that I was hooked. And that's when I was like, fuck me, Hemlock Vale is really damn good. On the first scenario we were playing, I was like, oh shit, this ain't fucking around. Like, this is real to me. I love that there are enemies in this scenario as well that only take 1 damage at a time. That's so neat. Am I going to be in a little bit of a problem in our rerun? I'm going to have to see how that works. Quick question, asking for a friend. You can type it in chat. How does Elusive and Butterfly Swords 5 work? Let me know in chat, please. Anyways, I think Lost Sister is really good. Is it going to stay this high on reruns? That is a great question, but I loved this scenario. There were so many people raging that Hemlock Vale as enemies they can't just wipe with Tony. Okay, yeah. Butterfly gets both attacks. We good. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Because it's immediate. Yeah, you're gonna resolve another attack against that enemy, even if he's not at your location. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think that a lot of people. I personally, throughout Hemlock Vale as a whole, love the encounter card design. I think it's really strong. And I like that there actually are scary treacheries and like scary enemies. It's such a dream. And that's incredible. I think that, like, yeah, if people want to complain that they can't just wipe an enemy with Tony, those people can start, like, looking inward and being like, wait a minute. Why do I want the game to adapt to me as opposed for me to adapt to the game? The games become so much more interesting when I have to change up my strategy to suit the game. It's like people, I mean, it makes sense. There's people who hate their cards getting countered in Magic the Gathering or their creatures getting removed in card games. Because the game is an enemy. It's the opposite player in a competitive game. The game doesn't need to adapt to you. You need to adapt to the game, and you need to just understand that. The thing in the depths. Swamp. This is the swamp. So, this one, realistically, we didn't interact with the turtle in this one. We killed the creature. We just hit him with a hammer a bunch of times. So I only got, I think like the full experience for what this one could be. But I'll be honest, in the pace in which the swamp sinks, I don't really know how you have time to do anything else. But I'll have to see on replays. I did enjoy it, though. I like the mechanics of it a lot. I'm going to call it a great scenario personally on the blind play. I think it was very strong. I love the sinking mechanic. I love that, like, if you are allying yourself with the cult for a little bit, you get the cultist tokens. I like the creature in the depths. I like the swamp. Once again, I'm just like curious to see how it is when you go for the save the turtle function of it. I think like gaming the guy with elusive can be pretty fun. I enjoyed it. I like the flavor of it a lot. It's kind of scary, like all being on the same location and watching it sink. It's a neat time, and I'm here for it. The Twisted Hollow. This is the lantern one. When I have my lantern in the woods. I think this one's just good. On my blind play, is it gonna hold up over time? I suppose that like remains to be seen, right? But this was the one scenario where I like that there's the pursuit stuff. Where I didn't really know like what was supposed to be happening. It's also like on the longer side where there's like that second map halfway through where you have to fight the bear. I don't know if this is one that I would replay often. I think it really just depends on how much Birdie's story actually matters in the grand scheme of things. If Birdie just like dies in the woods, what's that going to do to the whole campaign? We're probably going to find out. I imagine we'll skip it at some point to see the difference. But I think overall, I don't think it was a bad scenario. I like a lot of what it did. I like the lantern mechanic. This is something that I've said in my retrospective video, where I like that it takes the night and day mechanic and plays with it. I think this campaign does a really nice job of that. So Twisted Hollow is going to get that good boost from me. But honestly, it was my least favorite of the 6 scenarios we played. But I still think overall it was a good time. Okay. The Longest Night. So, I've played a lot of custom campaigns. And this was a mechanic, surviving an onslaught of enemies, that has happened a lot in custom campaigns. And it's where I decided I don't like this mechanic of having to survive an endless onslaught of enemies while holding out or protecting a location or people. It's never been enjoyable. With that said, though, I think this scenario was fucking goated, man. I thought Longest Night was awesome. An amazing scenario. It does require a lot of upkeep, but that upkeep actually is pretty easy to manage. That's today's YouTube video. It is today's YouTube video. This was the best implementation I've seen of this kind of mob-based swarming enemy mechanic. This is also why I have a slight bone to pick with the people who always say, like, oh, the custom stuff is... I mean, sorry, I shouldn't do the voice for them because these are just people with their own opinions. I only use those for people who are being, like, incessantly needy, but these people aren't being needy. They're just expressing their opinion. So let's roll that back and not do the voice. The people who say... like, the custom stuff is, like, always better than the official stuff. And it's true. Custom stuff does have a lot more time to refine their things. But I don't think that is always the case. Because I think that this is an example of the kind of finesse that the official design team can have with this stuff by adding complex mechanics, but they actually play relatively simple. The Astute review of this was... I know Astute doesn't like it, but Astute also like keeps dying to Cats of Saturn, so there's something I can't trust there. Maybe Astute... maybe Astute just actually has a problem with animal-based enemies, and then that's the actual issue. So, like, Astute can handle humanoids and cultists no problem, but as soon as they're an animal, it just, like, the universe unravels. So maybe, like, that's actually the issue. I will say as well, spoilers for the people who are watching live or have not seen our video of The Longest Night. We killed the bear on the second turn. So there is, like, that to it. Also, apparently the scenario has player elimination, like, from the campaign. Yes, please, give me up, gobble, gobble. And I also like that you can strive for a better ending, depending how much damage is put on the Star Children at the end. Is it going to hold up in replays? I don't know. So we're going to see how that goes. I think the bear was the only part of the scenario I got to play. Oh, did you just keep getting the rain? Was that the thing that makes you lose your actions? Yeah, that can be annoying, especially if you get a lot of them. But I mean, like, that's kind of the situation. Where you kind of, like, have to, like... I mean, on blind plays, it's hard to plan for that. But that can sometimes happen. And that is annoying when all your actions get stolen, especially when the scenario is so action-intensive. I think it's a really good scenario, though. I think it's amazing. At least on the blind play. And then we got Fate of the Vale, the final scenario, which does something that, as we talked about earlier in this video, is pretty contentious. And that is taking away your investigator. Oh no, my investigator's gone. That's okay. I love when the investigator's taken away. It gives you so much power. Because the whole thing is... So honestly, if we can, like, talk about it for a little bit. If we can get a little bit deeper. If you don't mind me getting a little bit nuanced in the discussion of this. But this campaign has probably the best implementation of its themes outside of Carcosa. So, like, Carcosa's whole thing, spoiler-free as possible, is about, am I crazy or am I not? Am I convicted to this or am I doubting myself, right? It's... The theme of this whole campaign is identity, right? And the idea is, in this final scenario, you are facing the prospect of losing yourself, losing your identity, and it becomes a quest to find out who you were again. There's a reason why, when you find yourself, it's such a huge boon outside of gameplay mechanics. It's to give you a second wind gameplay mechanics to get there. But it's supposed to feel good. Because for a brief few moments, a few rounds, you lost your entire character, your entire identity, and you were succumbing to the weird horror and losing yourself completely to the color like everyone did before you. All the animals, they've all fallen prey. The people in the cult started to lose themselves as well, and you were joining them. But when you find yourself, your character comes back, you get a full heal, you get overwhelmed with memories, and now you can start helping your friends, who you do remember, start to come back to their senses as well. And this is all that I gleaned, this entire concept, this entire theme, from gameplay. And that is incredibly impressive. And that is why I like Hemlock so much. Because it tells a good story through the gameplay mechanics while having interesting mechanics in this Abyss deck, which I thought was going to be a nightmare, but it was actually really fun to play with. That's actually the running theme that I had through Hemlock Vale, was watching boards get set up, seeing the mechanics I need to deal with, and panicking because I was like, there is so much shit that I need to keep track of. I'm gonna pop. But it all actually plays very well. I don't think Hemlock Vale is a good first campaign for new players, because I think you need a bit of experience to be able to manage all those moving parts. But I do think that Hemlock Vale was the best implementation of complex mechanics in a way that was entirely manageable so far. I do have problems with the final scenario, which is something that I've been talking about for a lot of these final scenarios coming up, is I do think that this scenario would be better if it was split into two parts. One, the climb out from underneath the tree, or wherever it was that you fell, and then actually dealing with Hemlock Vale. So that's where, like, I really got a bone to pick with that. I do wish that they would be less afraid about splitting final scenarios up. I think that they should do it more. I've also heard the complaints about how the agenda time is really tight in lower player counts. And I don't know if that's true. I could see it being true. There is a lot of stuff to have to go. How about a first campaign of playing with an experienced friend like you with Eric? I probably still would know. I would probably still, like, if I wasn't going in order, I would still have Eric go a bit later. Like, Hemlock probably like the 4th or 5th at the earliest. I don't know about the timing on the agenda and getting objectives done. That's something I'm going to need to experience myself when the time comes. So I can't comment on that right now. But I'm going to give... I don't know for sure, but I've heard reasons that you might not be able to split the scenario up. I mean, yeah, in its current design, yes. But I'm saying, like, if they designed it from the get-go to be 2 scenarios, those reasons wouldn't exist, right? Well, that's what I'm saying. Like on the back end, at like the starting point, if it was designed differently, I would think it would be tighter. I'm going to give this a great, though. I don't think it's amazing, but I think it is a great final scenario and an incredible blind play. And I love the, if you stare 15 seconds at the thing, you go crazy and you're driven insane. Strong disagree. Hemlock is a second or third campaign to play with my girlfriend. She loved the campaign. I think the story for Hemlock works well for a second campaign, provided one player can manage stuff. Yeah, like I said, I could be wrong. That's just like my thoughts after one blind play of it. But it can really change. I still personally would have it farther back, but I'm glad that it worked for you. But everyone's different. That's what I'm saying. My just general recommendation is that I would not recommend it this high. Based on counts of best and amazing, Hemlock seems to be your favorite, at least on this ranking. Hemlock does have the benefit of being a blind play, which increases its rankings. It probably does. Like, I imagine, like, in a year, Twisted Hollow might drop down to fine, right? But I will say there's no stinkers. There's no stinkers. We're going to see how it goes. But first blind placement, you can never really trust because it is just a blind play. Only one playthrough of it. These are just like my initial thoughts on it. And with that, the video's done. Should I rank these? Unspeakable Oath. I think I'm going to go like that. If I had to rate the top 5, I think it would be them. If I had to rate the bottoms, I think it would be like... I think it would be like that. I'm not going to rate any rank of the other ones, though, in their tiers, but... Excuse me. Yeah. I think that this has been... I had a great year playing Arkham. I had a lot of fun. I had some ups and downs, as you usually do with Arkhams and board games when you're playing by yourself. But honestly, I made a lot of, like... I think we have the least in the I don't like playing this potential. I'll have to check. I've never done a video where I look at my rankings over time for this. If that'd be interesting, I could look at doing it. It could be really fun to kind of see how my perspectives have shifted over time. But yeah, there's a link down to this tier list in the video description. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this and enjoyed listening to me ramble for almost 3 hours. Have a good one. Thanks for watching. And as always, a GG's.